Hey everyone, welcome to Infinity Harry. If you are enjoying our introduction Harry Potter and want to see more exciting content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This video includes a self-shaded human introduction in the first 30 seconds, followed by AI generation for creative scheduling purposes. So today we're gonna see second part. What if Harry Potter rose as the Dark Lord of Durmstrang? But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe this channel and share with your friends. Now let's start the video.
Here is short summary. Cast aside by his family and sent far from Britain, Harry rises through Durmstrang's tough halls, mastering dark magic, commanding respect, and claiming power no student ever dared touch. As he ascends as Durmstrang's new Dark Lord, the wizarding world must face the terrifying force it created. But before we start, if you want more stuffs like this, then please support to subscribe this channel and share with your friends. Let's start the video. December 25, 1994. It was finally time for the Yule Ball, and I had spent the last 20 days training my brother slightly harder, and he was still making great progress and should be 7th year level in Charms, Transfiguration, and Dada by June. I was still able to find time to train and spend time with Nysa though. Her power had grown greatly and she was on the verge of becoming a grand sorceress, but still needed a decent amount of power growth. I had been trying to woo her, and tonight I was hoping for us to consummate our relationship. I already prepared 2 rooms, one of which was set for a ritual, and the other was a romantic getaway room. Naturally, when I heard my brother was bring Cho Chong as his date, I prepared him one too and left a few potions there, and when I informed him of this, he blushed like never before. I noticed that Fleur came to the ball with Roger Davies. That poor weak-minded idiot looked like he might prematurely ejaculate from having his hand held by her. Crumb asked Granger for some reason. I suspected it was because the poor idiot had terrible taste in women. Diggory was here with some girl from Beauxbatons, though he was staring longingly at Cho and his date looked annoyed because he was ignoring her. Perhaps I could suggest that she leave him moments before the opening dance. That would be pretty funny. I pulled back a chair for Nysa to sit in and she sat down, while blushing at my surprisingly gentlemanly behavior. The decorations are lovely, Nysa admitted, somewhat grudgingly. Not as lovely as you, I said, looking at her. Are you trying to get me in bed, Harry Potter? Nysa asked, with a teasing smile. That depends, Sam. I succeeding. You'll have to try harder, but you're off to a good start. Nysa said, taking my hand. I'm glad to hear it, I said, as other people joined the table. I recognized Susan Bones, Hannah Abbott, and Ernest Macmillan, though I didn't recognize Susan's date. Hello, I said politely. Hello, they chorused in return. Daphne Greengrass, Tracy Davis, Blaise Zabini and his dates the Caro sisters, Neville Longbottom, and unfortunately Ginny Weasley, joined our table next. Hello, I said once more, fighting the urge to sneer at Weasley. Potter, Zabini said in return. Zabini. So, Potter, I heard you were trying to build a harem. Zabini said, with a smirk. I am. I need a wife per title. Is it true that you propositioned Fleur Delacour? Zabini asked in amusement. The entire table looked interested. Yes, right in front of her father. I replied. In front of War Mage Court Delacour, commander of the European War Mages. Zabini asked, looking at me like I was mad. Yes, we make it a habit to annoy each other. I really angered him during my interview to join the War Mages, and War Mage Pottle had to prevent us from fighting after Court threatened to modify the interview record to humiliate me. So far he's winning in our contest to annoy each other. He pinned an award to my flesh, and I flirted with his daughter and offered her a place in my harem. Eventually, I'll have to defeat Court in a duel, mainly to counter whatever severe humiliation he concocts. Are you mad? Neville asked, with an undertone of fear, and received sneers from the Slytherins. Maybe a little, but isn't everyone? I asked, making a few people laugh. Everyone suddenly began applauding as the champions entered and my table quickly joined in. My brother and Chong both looked happy to be here together. Roger Davies looked like he might orgasm at any moment from being that close to Fleur, and I even said that out loud and caused most of my table to laugh. Diggory was still lusting after Chong, and angering his date by ignoring her. Granger was soaking up the attention from being here with Crumb, like an attention whore. I was pleased to see that Karkaroff didn't approve of their relationship, but that wasn't surprising, considering that he was a pure-blood supremacist. I noticed that Percy Weasley was here in Crouch's place. He must have been promoted. That was surprising, but perhaps he was so good at his job that they would allow a Weasley an important position in a major department. I began reading my menu, eager to eat and then continue my seduction Nysa. All these people hindered my game some, but I'd manage. I eventually selected a stew for my meal. So, Harry, my grandfather speaks very highly of you. Greengrass said, pausing from her meal. He's quite impressed with your accomplishments, academic and otherwise. That's high praise from a man with a low opinion of Dumbledore, Grindelwald, and Voldemort. Yes, I have great respect for your grandfather and consider him a valuable ally. I said, not really sure how to respond to that. I couldn't have had Dumbledore and McGonagall demoted to mere figureheads without his help. Dumbledore will regain his positions and put you in Azkaban where you belong, and release my brother. Ginny proclaimed loudly, and with absolute confidence. That poor, stupid, delusional bint seemed to actually believe that. I'm surprised your brother is even still alive. It's not like he had much of a mind to lose there in the first place, I said, making most of the table laugh. Dumbledore is more likely to be placed into Azkaban than I am. He's already in danger of losing his position as Chief Warlock. The support he gained from defeating his lover Grindelwald is destroyed, and it's impossible for him to regain his position as headmaster or even a teaching position. There is so much evidence against him that if released would have him exiled from Britain, or thrown through the Veil or Key. Due to public outcry. Ginny looked like she was about to have a psychotic outburst like her banshee mother. I'm surprised that your grandmother allowed you to date Weasley, Neville. Greengrass said, preventing the outburst. She doesn't know yet, but why would she care? Neville asked in confusion. Because the Weasleys are blood traitors, with a history of using love potions. The Pruitts lost their titles of nobility and wealth because Molly Pruitt married a Weasley. Susan Bones explained, getting a glare from Weasley. You may have caused some difficulties for your grandmother. Well, I asked Hermione but she was going with Krum. Neville said. Ew. You asked Granger. Gross. I exclaimed, making several people laugh. She's even worse than Weasley. She's an arrogant egomaniac. She wants to free the house elves, abolish the noble classes, and give everyone's family magic to the world. I said in disgust, which they shared. Because it's unfair for us to benefit from our ancestors' hard work or more specifically keep our family magic from our savior Hermione Granger. I added sarcastically. Granger obviously won't amount to anything, Greengrass said in observation. I know. I thought about having her actually blacklisted, but haven't gotten around to it. You should. She would destroy our world with her stupidity and start another war. House elves depend on their bonds with their masters. Anyone can be elevated to noble status with effort. Family magic is bound to a family's blood and magic, and therefore useless to outsiders, unless they win the magic's allegiance. Greengrass said. Exactly. She knows nothing, yet thinks she does. We need to change subjects. All this talking about Granger, Weasley and Dumbledore is killing my mood. I said, before realizing that I was excluding Nysa. I began trying to salvage Nysa's night. I had hoped to make this special for her, but was distracted by meaningless things and people. When all the food had been consumed, Dumbledore stood up and asked the students to do the same. Then, with a wave of his wand, all the tables zoomed back along the walls leaving the floor clear, and then he conjured a raised platform into existence along the right wall. A set of drums, several guitars, a lute, a cello, and some bagpipes were set upon it. Yay! Nysa deadpanned. The weird sisters. I can't stand them. Neither can I replied during the applause. I watched the champions lead their dates onto the dance floor, and was thankful that James was actually leading. Mom had suffered quite a bit teaching him to dance, but after a week she stopped suffering injuries to her feet due to James stepping on them. I noticed that Nysa looked displeased and saddened with how the ball turned out. She must really hate the weird sisters. Perhaps we could have our own private ball with music of your choosing. I suggested. And I mean that literally, and I'm not just trying to get you in bed. I added, causing her to smile. Sure. Let's go. Nisa said, with a truly happy smile. Hours later, Nisa and I were lying in bed, recovering from our first round of say. We had spent hours dancing together, and finally I had succeeded in romancing her and we finally had say. Although I was gentle and took it slow. It was her first time, after all, and I didn't want to hurt her more than necessary. Sadly, she obstinately refused to benefit from the say ritual we performed, and I even offered to make it extra pleasurable for her by going out of my way to do so. The positive side of this was that I only needed to double my base mage power once more to become an archmage. You look pleased with yourself. Nisa commented with an amused smirk. Well, yeah, I gave you multiple orgasms and I'm almost an archmage. I wasn't aware that 79% counted as almost. Well, with rituals it is. I've been thinking about diverting a lot of my energy into performing as many as possible, and we'll be leaving Hogwarts soon, so I want to seize those opportunities while I can. Go ahead. I don't mind, but I don't want details or to talk about it, especially before or after we have say. Nisa replied. I really should have known better than to talk to my girlfriend about say with other women. Wasn't that supposed to be common sense? That's more than fair, I said, before pulling her closer to me and causing her to smile. January 5, 1995. It was the day of the dueling tournament's third round and I had seduced two girls in my spare time. That managed to help me get closer to my short-term goal of ascending to Archmage status, but it was nowhere near enough to get me close to surpassing Merlin and Morgana. I still had my emergency backup plan though, unfortunately I was saving it as a last resort. I could only do it once, and I had to choose very wisely on the timing and the level of power I had. Welcome to the third round of the dueling tournament. Flitwick began excitedly. Today we will watch Durmstrang and Beauxbatons compete, and the winner shall receive 1,000 galleons and the pride of being the best of the three schools. Flitwick paused for applause. First up shall be Fleur Delacour versus Harry Potter. Duelists, please step onto the platform. We both obeyed. Duelists, please bow. I gave a respectful nod of my head, but licked my lips and winked flirtatiously. I thought she briefly blushed, though she could have employed occlumency to stop. It looks like Potter took the opportunity to flirt. Flitwick said in amusement and with a huge smirk. I heard several people snicker or outright laugh. Begin. I quickly deflected Fleur's barrage into the protective barrier, and began my counter-attack. I sent a barrage of stunners and body binds at her, which she shielded against, but her shield broke on the second spell and she was taken out of the duel. That was surprising. I assumed she would channel more power into her shield. It wouldn't have done her any good, but it would have helped her last a little longer. I was broken from my musings by court cursing in French, and receiving both shocked and amused looks from those who spoke the language. I caught the gist of his anger. I was too damn powerful and no one ever stood a chance against me. He just called me a damned 14-year-old mage, and that got some weird and calculating looks directed my way. Harry Potter wins again, Flitwick said in surprise. I raised an eyebrow in his direction. I thought it would be difficult for you, but the power disparity was still so great that your base power obliterated her shield. That overshare caused some muttering around the hall. Next up is Nisa White versus Albert Ilariz. No, I'll be dueling Potter. Someone needs to put that half-blood in his place. Ilariz proclaimed loudly. He may have beat that half-breed, but a pure-blood and real wizard such as myself can easily put him in his place. He sneered in my direction. I noticed that several pure-bloods agreed with his behavior. Well, I'm bored anyway. If you're a fun little toy, then I just might not break you when I'm done. I said, unnerving him. Lose your nerve, princess. Worried that your father, uncle or mother, aunt will see their incest baby humiliated. I added, angering his entire family, and making most of the audience laugh. His parents did have a strong resemblance to each other, after all. Now either get your inbred ass up here, or sit down and shut up. I'm also more than willing to duel you outside the tournament's rules after, if that's what's holding you back. Fine. I'll beat you here, and again after. Ilariz said, quickly climbing onto the platform. I noticed that almost everyone was looking at him like he was a complete idiot, which was likely true. Flitwick gave a questioning look to the three headmasters who nodded in agreement, though Madame Maxime did so grudgingly and with obvious displeasure. Begin. I quickly took control and defeated him in under 3 seconds with a disarming charm. Harry Potter wins! Flitwick exclaimed, and he did so over the laughter at Hilary's humiliation and quick defeat. I stepped off the platform where Nysa was waiting. I whispered an apology for not giving her a chance to duel, but thankfully she understood. Hilary's was developing an eye twitch, and glaring murderously at me while looking like a damn lunatic. I couldn't help but to find that funny, even if I would have to watch the little bastard. Flitwick approached us and gave Nysa and I 500 galleons each, which we each took with a proud smile. Durmstrang wins the dueling tournament and the 1,000 galleon prize. Flitwick called out, and the Durmstrang delegation, and my family and friends cheered loudly. I noticed a lot of Slytherins and Ravenclaws were applauding too. I allowed my family to lead Nysa and myself out of the hall, and I sensed Hilary's following us. Potter. Hilary's called out hatefully. Are you forgetting something? No, although you are very forgettable. I replied, causing Dad, James, and Sirius to snicker. I want to duel. Now. He yelled angrily. All spells allowed, except unforgivables. Hilary's said, causing muttering to break out among the gathering crowd. I accept, I replied in amusement. He really took things far too seriously. However, you can give up anytime you want. It would be unfair to expect you to compete with me on equal footing when I'm not restrained by rules. We'll have to find someplace outside to duel. We can't do that inside. It would destroy too much. There is that little island in the Great Lake, James suggested. I quickly guessed which one he was talking about, and nodded in agreement. Yes, that would be perfect. We arrived near the island several minutes later. Just how are we getting onto the island? Hilary's asked, snidely. By flying, of course. Any other stupid questions? I don't have a broom with me. He replied. I took flight, while levitating him and flew us to the island. We arrived a few moments there and I gently sat us down and got some distance from him. Attack when ready, I said calmly, my wand already drawn. He quickly drew his wand and unleashed a bone breaker, which I wandlessly deflected into a tree that fell and burst into flames. He quickly entered a spell chain and began a constant barrage of potentially lethal spells, bone breakers, blood boilers, and cutting curses. I easily deflected them all and launched an area banishing through the dust before quickly banishing the dust for good measure. When it was over, I noticed that the idiot was kneeling on the ground, blinded and disoriented, and decided to take pity on him. I just stunned him and watched him fall on the ground. How disappointing. I might as well return us the shore. It wasn't like he would be a challenge for me. When I arrived back near the gathering group, I dropped Hilary's onto the ground like he was trash. He'll need to be renovated and have his eyes checked, I said to Madame Maxime and began to walk away. Where do you think you're going, boy? Moody asked angrily. Anywhere I damn well please, old man. I replied in amusement, before walking away. He launched a spell at the ground near my feet. You really shouldn't have done that, I replied coolly. I turned in the blink of an eye and telekinetically threw Moody further away from the crowd, and placed a containment ward around us. Was it a duel you wanted? All you had to do was ask, but now you've gone and annoyed me. Moody got to his feet and assumed a dueling stance, and began with a bone breaker which I deflected. I quickly made my move and began barraging him with bone breakers targeting his arms and legs. I could tell that he channeled more power into his shield, so I put more into my spells and quickly incapacitated him. I noticed our audience looked impressed, but the older people didn't, which was good. I was trying to hide my full capabilities by brute forcing through opponents, and letting people think that I had less skill. I wouldn't be able to do that for much longer. Circumstances will require me to abandon my facade of weakness. I bound Moody and dispelled the containment ward. Surrender your wand, Harry. Dumbledore called out. Ah, he was hoping to regain the Elder Wand's allegiance. Why? I used entirely legal magic when my opponents started off with lethal spells. Moody will already be punished for attempted assault on nobility and spend some time in Azkaban. No, he will not. Dumbledore informed me coldly, with a steely glint in his eyes. Going to abuse your position as Chief Warlock, and refuse to try him before the Wizengamot? I asked, already knowing that he would. Harry Allister believed that you used dark magic and tried to take you in for interrogation. Dumbledore said, realizing I could deal more damage to his public image. Sadly, he's no longer an Auror and was therefore just playing vigilante. Old habits die hard, I guess, right, Dumbles? Release him. Now, Harry. Dumbledore said, ignoring the subtle taunt. I placed some powerful family wards around Moody in reply. Come get him, you senile has-been. I taunted. Dumbledore placed some wards to protect the people watching our exchange. Flitwick, Snape, and McGonagall began helping him. Dumbledore stepped forward, looking greatly annoyed that I didn't simply obey his commands. I still had most of my power at my disposal, around 98% of it. I was glad, because if I beat Dumbledore it would be great for my plans and allow me to recruit better. It was time for some fun. I began the duel with a cremation curse, which Dumbledore shielded against. I was pleased though when his shield cracked. I wandlessly knocked Dumbledore back in wards he placed. I sighed. Honestly, all you had to do was your job, and let Moody get tried before the Wizengamot, but you just had to abuse your position and then escalate the situation further. I deflected a rather forceful spell with a specialized shield, and unleashed a massive barrage of bone breakers using every bit of my full speed to chain them all together. He formed a massively power Protega variant to defend himself, though I quickly realized his shield could take it and followed up with an overpowered concussion curse that obliterated his shield and forced him to hastily form a secondary shield to defend against my spell, and even that shield cracked. I could tell that he had burned through a lot of power defending against my own. I estimated he used up 20% and I had merely used 5%. I still needed to fight with skill, and not just raw power. I had almost godlike stamina, but I needed to conserve it. Although Dumbledore did look quite tired, and I could probably continue like this for a quick win. Yes, he looked tired, but, to my surprise, he quickly sent a disarming charm at me. I conjured a vengeance shield that reflected the spell back at him at 3 times the power. He shielded against it and wasted even more of his power. That wasn't very nice, I said, before barraging him slowly to give him plenty of time to form a shield, and when he did, I sped up my barrage to quickly chip away at his magical power by exploiting the power differences. 1 minute later, I stopped casting wandlessly to yawn and then continued. That caused some laughs. Finally, his shield broke and he was too weak to continue channeling power into it. I just stunned him, and watched him fall. When he was down, I blasted the protective wards, that the Hogwarts teachers erected, into oblivion. Now is anyone else confused about the meaning of being forbidden to assault nobility? I asked, in annoyance. They quickly assured me that they understood the meaning. February 24, 1995. It was finally the day of the second task, and my brother had worked hard to prepare. I was confident that he would win this tournament and put his doubters and enemies in their place. Our family was pleased with James's progress, and Dad had begun dueling with him so he could get some experience. I was just surprised they weren't all angry at how I beat Moody and Dumbledore. Though, honestly, I didn't feel like I won, when he prevented Moody from being punished for his crime. The only good thing to come from that was that he destroyed a lot of his support base by not protecting the rights of the nobility and abusing his position. There was already a movement forming to get him removed as Chief Warlock, and to replace him with Madame Longbottom. I did need a Chief Warlock that I could control, and get some chosen laws passed with. I finally achieved my goal of becoming an Archmage, and I owed a big thank you to Marietta Edgecombe and Faye Dunbar for having say with me, though the other 2 girls were wonderful too. My defeat of Dumbles and Moody, and Fleur and Eloise really got me a good fan base of girls to use in say rituals. And I have been using them. And loving it. One ritual now gave me more power than even Dumbledore or Voldemort possess. Sadly, to become a magus I had to multiply my base Archmage power by 7-fold, and to do that I had to gain power equivalent to 4 mages per tier. I had finally perfected my improved rankings for magical power. Lord, Lady of Magic A Magus who grew their base magus power 7-fold. I theorized that at this level a magical would even be partially composed of magic and gain several interesting abilities. Sadly, it was only theory at this point. I could always expand this rank into 7 tiers as well. I did love power after all. Magus and Archmage who multiplied their base Archmage power 7 times. Among this rank was Merlin, Morgana, and many widely worshipped pagan deities and mythological figures. Naturally, I separated this rank into 7 tiers, and my newly created spell could measure those tiers. Archmage. I divided the measuring spell into 7 tiers. At the bottom you have a tier 1 Archmage, with the power of 4 mages. Tier 2, then the power of 8. This pattern continued all the way to tier 7, and without rituals was deemed impossible to achieve, though most were lazy and I included myself in that assessment. Among this rank was myself, and Advik Patil. Mage. I divided the measuring spell into 4 tiers. To get to the next tier you had to double your base mage power. I was well aware that I wouldn't be an Archmage had I not used rituals to grow my power faster. Grand Sorcerers. Grand Sorceress believed to have twice the power of a sorcerer, even while at the lowest levels. Among this rank was Nysa White, Albus Dumbledore, Tom Riddle, Voldemort, and Court Delacour. My great-grandfather, Henry Potter, was a Grand Sorcerer before he died. Sorcerers and Sorceress. No one is certain how much power growth was required from the Warlock rank, but it was quite a bit in my opinion. Among this rank was my little brother James Potter, Alistair Moody, though he seemed a lot weaker now, Fleur Delacour, Alberta Larise, Phileas Flitwick. Though as part goblin the physical advantages were presumably nullified, Augusta Longbottom, Lord Alexander Greengrass, Amelia Bones, and Severus Snape, though I suspected that a poor diet stunted his growth and prevented him from experiencing the best benefits of that power. Warlocks believed be twice as strong as an ordinary witch or wizard, though no one was actually certain. I suspected that Alistair Moody was now this rank. And finally your lowly witch or wizard. Basically if they weren't a squib then they are this, the bottom of the barrel. Speaking of the bottom of the barrel, Diggory had failed to retrieve his father from the lake, and Crumb has just returned with Granger. Fleur failed to retrieve her sister, and I had discreetly messaged James to rescue Gabrielle also. That was several minutes ago and I was beginning to get concerned. Finally, he surfaced with both hostages. Cho and Gabrielle were both safe, and Fleur and her family all looked relieved. He rescued Amos Diggory too. Why would he slow himself further? I just hoped that he would still more gain points as I planned and maintain his lead, and possibly get an even greater one. They finally got their bearings and began making their way toward the bank. They finally got to safety and people began helping them out of the lake while congratulating James. I remained close, but not in the way, while observing Dumbledore conversing the Chief Merperson. I really needed to learn to speak Mermish. I hated not knowing what people were talking about. A conference before we give the marks, I think. Dumbledore said, before motioning the judge to huddle up. Look after Gabrielle, Fleur told Madame Pomfrey, and then turned to James. You saved her, she said breathlessly. Even though she was not your hostage. Yeah, said James. Fleur bent down and tried dotting him on the cheek, but was stopped by Cho who glared at her, while holding James protectively. I don't think Cho is okay with sharing, Fleur. I said, with a smirk and got smacked on the back of my head by Mom, which got some snickers from several eavesdroppers. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached our decision. Merchieftainess Mercus has told us exactly what happened at the bottom of the lake, and we have therefore decided to award marks out of 50 for each of the champions, as follows. Fleur Delacour, though she demonstrated excellent use of the bubble-head charm, was attacked by Grindylows as she approached her goal, and failed to retrieve her hostage. We award her 25 points. Applause from the stands. I deserve 0, Fleur said throatily. You did better than Diggory at least. I said, getting a glare from both Diggorys. Cedric Diggory, who also used the bubble-head charm, albeit one of much lesser quality, also failed to retrieve his hostage and even hid from Grindylows while he watched Fleur get attacked. He tried attacking a Merperson and accidentally burst his charm, and had to be rescued. We award him 1 point out of pity. Most of the audience laughed at Diggory, who looked enraged at being humiliated yet again. My strategy of damaging his confidence and indirectly hindering his performance and even his magic was working great. He made a great test subject. Victor Crumb used an incomplete form of transfiguration, which was nevertheless effective, and was first to return with his hostage. We award him 45 points. High Master Karkaroff clapped particularly hard, looking very superior. James Potter used gillyweed to great effect, Bagman continued. He returned last, and well outside the time limit of an hour. However, the Merchieftainess informs us that Mr. Potter was first to reach the hostages, and that the delay in his return was due to his determination to return all hostages to safety, not merely his own. My family and Cho gave James half exasperated, half commiserating looks. We have decided, unanimously, that this shows moral fiber and merits full marks. We award Mr. Potter 50 points. His lead was now much more secure, and that should guarantee his victory. If my suspicions were correct, he would eventually encounter Voldemort and be forced to fight him. I knew there were only a few ways for Voldemort to regain his body, and thankfully he would be greatly weakened and vulnerable. Though, I had no intentions taking advantage of that weakness. A war was the perfect time to eliminate people I wanted gone, and Voldemort and Dumbledore were highly reliable when it came to slow and ineffective warfare. They would give me all the time that I needed. Finally, after a lot of noise from the peasantry, Bagman spoke. The third and final task will take place at dusk on the 24th of June, continued Bagman. The champions will be notified of what is coming precisely 1 month beforehand. Thank you all for your support of the champions. Everyone began heading back towards Hogwarts, and Madame Pomfrey was herding the champions and hostages back to the castle to get into dry clothes. 30 minutes later, my family, Cho, and James Sycophants were relaxing in the Gryffindor common room. Granger had been glaring at my brother quite a bit, and she was beginning to get on my last nerve. It was plain to see that she was jealous that her worthless boyfriend Crumb was being outdone by a 14-year-old, that was with her helping Crumb and betraying her school. She just needed a little push to break. I'm glad you're still dominating this tournament, and doing so with a major point lead. I said, and his sycophants nodded like good dogs. You're even beating that idiot Crumb. I added, making a lot of people laugh. Victor isn't an idiot, Granger screeched. I discreetly targeted her with a curse to release inhibitions. A lovely piece of black family magic that was untraceable and had been used in the past to get threats to destroy themselves. I've seen his class performance, he is a huge idiot. His strategies show that much, clearly amateurish and simple. Human transfiguration is incredibly advanced and difficult. It took Victor a month to perfect his method. It's certainly more impressive than gillyweed. Granger said angrily. Oh, and how do you know how long it took Victor? Because I helped him. Granger said smugly, with a pleased look on her face. I could tell that she had wanted to be recognized for her work for a while now. Betraying your school and then bragging about it, I said, in reproving tone. How disgraceful. Clearly behavior unbecoming of someone who seeks positions of power, and that's not even accounting for hatred for our society and traditions. Wizarding society. You're all savages who think Avery, family magic, and marriage contracts are acceptable. We should all have access to the same magic. Older families have no right to hoard the knowledge their ancestors created or keep me from it. Granger said, shocking the entire common room with her hatred. Someone obviously has to save you from yourselves, and since no one else is, I suppose it will be me. You can't take people's family magic, you stupid bint. It only works for members of a family. I said angrily. I think I can, Potter, Granger said hatefully. I'll find a way to undo whatever restricts the magic to certain families. And I think your mother should have swallowed the night of your conception. I replied, with a smirk. Granger went for her wand, and I let her. I already had mine ready. When she drew her wand, I disarmed her, having already discerned the intended spell, a blasting curse. That's attempted murder of not only nobility, but the heir apparent of two most ancient and noble houses, and even admitting to planning to steal family magic. Now I can legally do this. I snapped her neck with a gesture and then disintegrated her body. Everyone was shocked by that act and were gaping at me. That should preserve the peace. And rid the world of an arrogant egomaniacal by ch with delusions of importance, intelligence, and superiority. Indeed, Hadrian, a familiar voice said. I turned to face the source and saw a pleased-looking Court Delacour. I'd like to speak with you in private. All right, I said, rising from my seat. Court backed out of the entrance, and began walking away. I sensed my parents rise to follow us, and Nisa and James joined them. Court and I entered a room moments later, and we waited on them. Court looked quite amused by what appeared to be overprotectiveness or distrust. You sensed them too? I asked. He nodded in response, but looked impressed by my being able to sense magic. My parents entered moments later, followed by James and Nisa. I began securing the room with spells to ensure our privacy. What did you want to speak with me about? I asked, after securing the room. Well, first, congratulations, Fleur has decided to join your harem. You telling your brother to rescue Gabrielle really sold her on the idea. Court said, in annoyance. But you aren't sold on the idea, I said in observation. Well, Fleur is my eldest, and I resigned myself to having to marry her off and see some weak idiot eventually wield my family's wealth and influence, but this presents an alternative. Court said, before withdrawing a contract and handing it to me. It was short and sweet, and right to the point. A magically binding agreement that one of mine and Fleur's offspring would become Court's heir. I detected no attempts at deception, though Court wanted to choose which child. I'm also willing to aid you in the upcoming war that you have been preparing for. Court said. This is incredibly reasonable, but what does your daughter have to say about this? I handed the paper to my parents. I could tell they wanted to read it. She understands and is agreeable. Court replied. I scanned his mind with my ability to drain knowledge and confirmed it. Are you done invading my mind to verify the truth? Impressive, by the way. I nodded. And if Fleur and I learn we can't stand each other and end up separating before conception of a child, then I gain nothing, but will most likely withdraw my support of your causes. I am impressed with the group you have assembled, though. Just the small group you have could dominate your ministry, and your target is merely the Death Eaters and their allies. Court said, getting raised eyebrows from my family. Our family needed allies, and the Order and Ministry were both useless and untrustworthy. Well, several members of Lord Grindelwald's inner circle are powerful allies. Court said, getting shocked looks. What? It's my job to protect Europe, but it did require a lot of effort to investigate. You have Charles and Doria Potter, Augusta Longbottom, and Alexander Greengrass, all on your side, all are sorcerers and incredibly skilled. My family looked at Nisa like she was going to instantly run and blab the secret. Don't worry, she won't tell. She has her own secrets to keep. Nisa suddenly looked very nervous. Yes, she does, and I know that secret, and I trust her. I said, taking her hand into my own. Ah, Dad, James, and Sirius said teasingly. Hush, you three. The contract is reasonable, I'll sign it. Harry, aren't you forgetting something? Mom asked. Yes, I need to get your promise of aid and the exit clause in writing. Court nodded in amusement and began writing, but Mom looked angry. You're underage, you can't sign magically binding contracts. Mom said angrily. I don't approve of you having a harem, Harry. Court called it a harem, but it's really a collective. I said, causing Mom to glare at me and Sirius to snicker. I was going to be with multiple women anyway, at least this way it's all confined to legally recognized relationships. I said, trying to convince her. I really fail to see your problem with me having a more than one girlfriend or wife. You've known I would since I was made Sirius heir. I'm not gonna run around recruiting new women all the time, and I think we can both agree that this contract serves a very good purpose. Mom looked even angrier that I used a logical argument. If you're doing it for me, I could marry Fleur, James volunteered with a blush. No thanks, Court replied, your brother is much more powerful and can produce stronger heirs. At this, James glared at him. Hadrian is incredibly hardworking, and this has resulted in his immense power and skill, and that makes him a very desirable son-in-law, lover, and husband to women who are looking. Yes, and think about how Cho would feel. She doesn't seem the type to share. I added. Still, Harry, no harems. Mom interjected. Okay. I only needed one anyway. Harems, plural, would be overkill. I said, twisting her words. I finished the additions to the contract. Court said, interrupting what would likely be punishment for Cheek. I took it, and quickly read over it. I spent a minute inspecting it, and then signed. A glow signaled the agreement's binding, and caused dumbfounded looks to appear on everyone's face. By the way, I participated in an ancient form of trial that caused magic to recognize me as an adult. I said, while being purposely vague. There were several dozen, but I became emancipated by winning a lordship from an adult, multiple times, but I didn't want them to know that yet. It wasn't dark, evil, or truly dangerous though. I added to ease their minds. You became an adult and didn't tell us. Mom asked angrily. Dad looked quite angry too. I didn't know that I performed the trial at the time. I only learned that later and only kept it secret because I had no intention of using the rights and didn't want to cause problems over nothing. Dad looked a little more understand, but I could tell that neither were pleased with my secrecy. There was a knock at the door, and Dad went to answer it. James, Dumbledore said, when the door was opened. Where is Harry? Why, Dumbledore? Dad asked in annoyance. And why are Alistair and Shacklebolt here? Because he murdered Hermione Granger. Dumbledore said, angrily. He must be punished for that crime and they are here to ensure that. He killed her in self-defense after she tried attacking him with what looked to be a blasting curse, and had she managed to succeed she would have accidentally killed myself too. She admitted to planning a revolution and a plot to steal family magic from everyone so they could all share the same magic. I'm well aware that you don't care if it was justified or not, you don't care, you just want to play vigilante. There was an entire room full of witnesses that can prove the truth, but you don't care, because you're just as dark as your lover Grindelwald. Dad was hit with a stunner. I watched him get knocked into a wall, and I snapped. I quickly moved everyone to the floor with wandless magic, and launched a lightning curse, and curved it through the doorway. I was rewarded by a scream of agony, and continued. I entered their line of sight and blasted Moody with dual bone breakers to his wand arm and good leg. I was lucky to get Dumbledore with my lightning curse, but he was already getting up. I blasted Shacklebolt back into a wall with a black family blasting curse that he tried shielding against, and cut Dumbledore's wand arm off with my 7th year spell creation project, a fiendfire infused cutting curse. I smirked as it was took it off at the shoulder, and had to quickly dodge Moody's blood boiler, and then I broke his arm. I observed Shacklebolt shakily get up and launched an overpowered stunner at him that decimated his hastily formed shield and removed him as a threat. You truly have no shame, Albus Dumbledore, trying to frame and dispose of a 14-year-old. I have no idea if you were always evil, manipulative, and controlling or if it was a recent thing, but I'm leaning towards the former. Your time as Chief Warlock is over. You're vigilante who has no respect for the law and its true enforcers. You think yourself above the MU are clearly unsuitable and unworthy to be entrusted with our laws. Dumbledore looked like he was shocked, though that could be from losing his arm. I did enjoy playing the victim, anyway. Well said, Harry, Dad said from the doorway. Yes, I destroyed Dumbledore's cut-off arm. I can't have him reattaching that, and I take crippling enemies very seriously and literally. Can you contact the Aurors and have them arrest Albus Dumbledore and Kingsley Shacklebolt for assault on nobility, and in Dumble's case being a vigilante and any other crimes he committed? What about me? Moody asked. Nothing will happen to you. You failed to achieve anything and I'm feeling merciful. I omitted the fact that he was rapidly weakening and barely even a threat anymore, and that as long I was on alert I would be fine. Off to the hospital wing now. I said to Moody, making shooing gesture. May 24, 1995. The last 3 months were amazing. I had finally achieved several of my goals. Dumbledore was placed into Azkaban, but he escaped 2 days later with Fawkes' help. His property was sent to his brother Aberforth, and I had learned that Dumbles knew about the Horcruxes, and I promptly retrieved Voldemort's Horcrux and left an identical copy behind. I made sure to leave behind some surprises to harm Voldemort and severely weaken Dumbledore. Shacklebolt was fired, forced to compensate our family, and then banned from holding a government position. Augusta Longbottom replaced Dumbledore as Chief Warlock, and she and Alexander Greengrass will respectively act as headmistress and deputy headmaster. I managed to convince Alexander to take McGonagall's job, him being a transfiguration master rivaling Dumbledore and McGonagall's combined skills made that uncontestable. Granted he would take the job next term, we couldn't fire her until after the term. Horace Slughorn consented to replace Snape for Professor Mary Thought's old office, a raise and my brother would end up joining his Slug Club. Nymphadora's father, Ted Tonks, agreed to teach history of magic after being offered the job. He was one of the very few people with a mastery in it. We arranged for a replacement for both of Hagrid's positions, and he would soon be removed from Hogwarts grounds. I was well on my way to purging Hogwarts of Dumbledore's influence, and had even managed to destroy a vanishing cabinet that posed a security risk. I got Fudge and his supporters on my side too, and was positioned to purge the Ministry of Voldemort's and Dumbledore's supporters. Did you hear that someone attacked Krum and Mr. Crouch disappeared? Seamus Finnegan said, to his friend Dean Thomas. What? I asked in shock. I quickly walked over to them. Tell me everything you know. You should ask your brother. He discovered it with Headmistress Longbottom. I nodded gratefully and walked away. Over the next 30 minutes, I learned that someone had attacked a member of foreign delegation, which endangered international relations, and abducted Crouch. I also learned that Snape delayed my brother from reporting the event and most likely allowed it happen. Fortunately, Hagrid attacked Karkaroff when he insulted McGonagall, who meddled in matters that she had no reason to. I now had cause to dispose of 3 Dumbledore supporters, which would help on the public relations front. Soon Hogwarts would be secured. Snape would be permanently dealt with, and Dumbledore and Voldemort would be deprived a resource and servant. I would be using Snivellus in a ritual of sacrifice. His power, knowledge, and skill would serve me. The best part was that I would get away with it. I knew exactly how to. I would make it look like he fled in fear or resignation. June 24, 1995. It was finally the day of the third task and James would win this, I knew it. He caught up to the 7th years in magical knowledge, and had spent June practicing and honing his skill with it and the other years of spells that were rushed through. His skill in dueling had greatly improved, and I expected him to either win or at least come second only to Fleur. Coming second to Diggory or Krum was unacceptable, both were inferior magically, mentally, and in bloodline. I was so proud of James, though, he had stopped being lazy and had become a mid-level sorcerer. I just hoped that was enough to survive combat with a weakened Voldemort. I had finally managed to achieve my short-term goal of becoming a Tier 3 Archmage, and was halfway to Tier 4. I was in position to ascend to Magus status in the event of an emergency, but that was a last resort and my recent plans involved waiting until I was a Tier 3 Magus and halfway to 4. Waiting until then would propel my power towards the limit of my scale, but that would likely be years from now. I added Snape's power to my own, but that was nothing more than a drop in a vast ocean of power. His skills, however, were highly useful to me and I was already planning on bolstering my personal stores of potions and taking my Dada mastery test early. I had been spending some spare time putting tracking spells on Dumbledore and Voldemort's supporters. I was fortunate that there were so few tracking spells that countering and even using them was a rarity. This would enable me to track my enemies and even get an idea where a Fidelius charm is cast. The charm may void my tracking spell temporarily, but it wouldn't dispel it. That would require knowledge of the charm and how to counter it. I was smart enough to create a modified version and then protect it under family magic, and that made countering and analyzing it far more difficult. I was getting visibly annoyed and concerned for my brother. He hadn't returned and hadn't won the tournament yet. Krum, Diggory, and Fleur had already returned. Diggory was the first and had tried beating my brother in a duel to remove him from the tournament. He was dominated in that duel, proving James the better wizard, and humiliating Diggory once more. Krum had been imperious and hurt Fleur, but was taken out by James. That weak-minded idiot would have to be dealt with, and in such a way that couldn't be traced back to me. Karkaroff had already fled to the house that I had placed under the Fidelius, which I found quite pathetic, considering that he was safe at Hogwarts. It was small, but very nice for a single man and very well warded. When I made that deal with Karkaroff, I actually improved the warding by getting a wardstone that could handle mage-level wards. It was far from the best, but would take more than Voldemort or Dumbles to break. It would likely magically exhaust whichever side eventually tracked him, and I was sure that would eventually happen and would be entirely Karkaroff's fault. I knew that he would eventually do something stupid and expose himself. Finally, James slammed down onto the ground, and cheers and screams of joy broke out from the audience. My family and I went to go congratulate him on his victory. Fudge, and Augusta and Alexander were already there. Voldemort's back, James said to the group near him. I could tell that Fudge didn't believe him, but I saw that Augusta and Alexander were faking the appropriate level of concern. I'll take him to the hospital wing, Moody said, grabbing at James. I wandlessly stunned him. No, you'll be questioned under veritaserum due to suspicious behavior. I summoned his flask, and smelled its contents. Polyjuice potion, I said, before handing it to Professor Slughorn to verify, and he quickly agreed. I relieved Moody of his wand and levitated him away. Mom and Dad did the same for James. Fudge just left the hospital wing where he witnessed Crouch's interrogation and was presented with evidence proving Voldemort had returned. Fudge still didn't believe him. The evidence are my brother and his Dementor key, Ed Crouch, which destroyed a viable witness. But I had just caught up with him, and I had to regain control of him and even increase it. Minister Fudge, we need to talk. I know you don't believe us, but he is back and I'm willing to help you stay in power through the crisis and even offer you protection from the wolves of the world. I said, having stopped him. Why would I need protection? Fudge questioned angrily. Because Voldemort has returned, and it's only a matter of time before the people get desperate and want Dumbledore pardoned for his horrible crimes and give him political power. He was the only one Voldemort ever feared, but Dumbledore is truthfully no better than the Dark Lord. He cannot hold a position here, but he could come after your job and the people would give it to him. I can make sure my family's efforts to announce Voldemort's return aren't so severe that it endangers your position as minister, and will even give you great advice that will improve your approval ratings greatly. I said, choosing my hastily formed words carefully. I can even improve your family's wards and might get you a minor title of nobility. I agree, Fudge said, his greed shining through. Idiot, I just became the magical king of Britain in all but title. What do I do first? First, let the news of Voldemort's return spread, and when it does you state that you will do everything in your power to increase funding for the DMLE and create remedial schools for those seeking careers as Aurors, hit wizards, and healers. This will show that even if you don't believe us, that you're willing to take measures to make Britain feel safe. Fudge seemed compliant, so I continued. This will also greatly strengthen the ministry's capabilities in the long term and serve to improve your public image. Oh yes, my plans were going well. June 27, 1995, the former Malfoy Manor. Hogwarts students had finally been let out for summer break. I had already returned to Durmstrang, retrieved Grindelwald's remaining loot and returned home. I had decided to take my mastery tests at ICW headquarters in Zurich, Switzerland in my spare time. When I left Durmstrang, having decided to continue my education at home, my grandparents left with me, resigning from their positions. To my immense surprise, so did Professor White, but that was nothing compared to when he gave me his blessing to marry Nysa. He kind of insisted on it, and admitted to knowing that I had say with her. He made it clear, in no uncertain terms, that she was to become my Lady Black. I agreed and invited him to a gathering I was having, and suggested someone he might bond with. That gathering would be occurring soon and my family would get to meet their new allies. Nicholas and Perenelle were the first to arrive via Portkey. Welcome, I said to them. Nicholas, Perenelle, I would like you to meet my family, my father, Lord James Potter, my mother, Lady Lily Potter, and my younger brother James Potter Jr. This is my godfather Sirius Black, I said, gesturing to each person. I'd like you all to meet Nicholas and Perenelle Flammel, the first of my allies. The next to arrive were Court and Fleur Delacour. I repeated the introductions after a failed joke about a French invasion. Augusta and Alexander were next to arrive, followed by Advic Pottle. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Advic Pottle, commander of the War Mages of Asia. Next was Aaron Wolf, the warlord trying to restore Israel to its former glory. I introduced him as such. I'm only here because you promised to compensate me greatly in exchange for hearing you out. And I will. 1,000 gold bars should be enough to continue your efforts. I replied. He nodded in agreement. Next to arrive was my grandparents, and Nysa and Perseus White. I promptly introduced them. Damian Garcia and Alexander Van arrived next, followed by Van's allies in other Russian-oppressed countries. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Damian Garcia of Spain, and Alexander Van of Ukraine. I said, as Garcia glared at Court and Advic. I wasn't aware that war mages would be attendants, Damien said, in an accusing tone. Yes, I've persuaded them to reconsider their positions on Morocco. I said, getting his hopes up. Though, I hope you'll honor your side of our agreement. I added, making the threat clear. I will. I assume you can honor yours, boy. Van said, glaring at me. I can, but don't ever call me boy again. I replied, causing him to smirk. And if I do? He asked. Then you'll find out why you're the only one here stupid enough to challenge me. I responded, causing him to become angry, but he fortunately realized that other more powerful and skilled people respected me and chose to be silent. That was a very wise choice. Better late than never, I suppose. Davi Bidencourt, Alejandro Abreu both arrived at the same time. Welcome, I said, as they recovered from the Portkey trip. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Devi Bidencourt, of Brazil, and Alejandro Abreu, of Argentina. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for inviting us. Devi said in reply. You're both welcome. Let's all get inside so we can begin. I said, gesturing them inside. They all obeyed the command. We arrived in the meeting room a few minutes later, and we seated ourselves. I suppose, I should begin with why you were contacted. Britain's Dark Lord, Voldemort, born Tom Marvolo Middle has recently had his body restored, but we were warned by Britain's self-styled Light Lord Albus Dumbledore of it, and I began recruiting allies starting with the Flamels. Naturally, I don't expect your aid purely out of the kindness of your hearts. You all have goals to achieve, enemies needing defeated, and projects that have stalled. My offer is simple, a favor for a favor. I'm interested, but my largest issue is funding for my war. Aaron Wolf, warlord of Israel said. Several seemed to share his problem. While I am nowhere near Nicholas' skill level in alchemy, I have acquired the means to produce chrysopoeia and have successfully done so. Rest assured, funding is easily resolved and I can honor prior and future agreements. I was lucky those descendants of Greek gods studied ancient Greek alchemy, it enabled me to fund this venture. I had my elf bring samples of the bars to my guests. There, detection spells can prove that it's real gold. They all cast the detection spells and were satisfied. I was glad that I remembered to suggest they learn the spell if they hadn't already. I informed them that they could either keep them or leave them on the table. They all naturally opted to keep them. I can provide funding, and Advic and Court have both agreed to speak in support of those being oppressed by magical Russia, and to conveniently forget about Morocco. I said, winning support of the former Soviet countries and Spain. Have I addressed your money-related concerns? They all nodded. A few had clear greed obvious in their eyes. You have the support of magical Spain, Mr. Potter. Damien Garcia announced. The representatives of Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Georgia, Belarus, Estonia, Latvia, Moldova, Lithuania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Finland proclaimed their support. I wish I had gotten the rest of the former Soviet countries, but Finland was an unexpected but welcome addition. They were all just tired of dealing with Russia's harassment and have asked to join the anti-Russia effort. That handled three parties at the table. Ukraine was chosen to speak for the former Soviet countries. Bidencourt and Abreu, are you still having issues with Ramirez? I asked, having not kept up with the situation. Yes, he humiliated us during a diplomatic meeting. Abreu replied, putting diplomatic meeting in air quotes. If he isn't dealt with soon, then Mexico will control South America. Only Panama and Colombia stand in his way. How powerful is he? Aaron Wolf asked. An archmage. We've no idea how close to mega status he is, though. We know he abuses, say, magic rituals to rapidly grow his power. The sad part is that those rituals don't have horrible side effects that we can take advantage of. Bidencourt replied with an undertone of bitterness. So, Advic and I will eventually have to confront him together to achieve victory. 2 archmages should be enough. You're an archmage. You can't be older than 16. Bidencourt exclaimed. Yes, I am, and I'm 14 by the way. I recently reworked the old power measuring spell, and I'm halfway to mega status. I suspect that Advic is much more powerful, so between us we should have power greater than a magus. I said, causing shocked exclamations all around the room. Hadrian, I'd like you to measure my power with your spell, Advik said, from near me. I nodded and cast the spell. The information flowed into my mind. Tier 4 Archmage. Well, Advik asked. Tier 4 Archmage. The one weakness of my spell was that it didn't specify mid or low level in a rank. A great spell that you modified. Advik replied. You made it vastly superior to the much older version. You have the support of magical Brazil and Argentina, but when can you deal with Ramirez? Bidencourt said. Advik and I, along with the two of you, will have to schedule something. My schedule is largely free and open, but I doubt yours are. Understandable. Now, perhaps we can all hear what you want from all of us in exchange. Bidencourt replied. When we have advanced warning, we will likely request soldiers from you, or the names of well-behaved mercenaries to hire. Several of them seemed to have realized why they were invited. Quote. And most of us have our own private armies and extensive contacts. Wolf said in realization. Yes, and I will be aiding in return, though I'll have to employ precision strikes intended to get the best results with the least time. I'm confident that I can greatly help you achieve a few of your goals in a month, with some background information and knowledge of your jus in bello. Very well, Wolf replied. In that case, you have the support of magical Israel and my army. Excellent. Are there any other concerns or issues to be raised? I asked, with a smile. Not an issue or concern, but I think even one of you can easily defeat Ramirez. He's not very skilled, he just pours power into spells and focuses on doing damage to enemies. Abreu said. I began quickly forming plans. That's good to know, and should greatly speed up the resolution of this threat. Anything else? The gold that was promised to aid our projects. Alexander Van said, somewhat insistently. Of course, I said, before summoning my house elves. They gave magically expanded trunks full of gold bars to Van, Wolf, Garcia, and several others leading their country's rebellions against magical Russia. If any of you would like to stay the night, you may. I know portkeys can be very unpleasant. They all refused and quickly left. Well, except for Nysa, Perseus, Advik, and Court and Fleur. That went well, Court said, somewhat grudgingly. Yes, it did, I agreed, ignoring his tone. Fleur wants to move in with you, by the way. Court said, with an amused smile. Fine with me. When are you marrying my daughter? Perseus asked. If she wants to marry me, then I'll go buy a ring and make a proper proposal. I already love her and have told her so. I said in reply. She will be your eventual Lady Black, Perseus said, leaving no room for argument. That was the plan, but don't be a pest. Why the fixation on House Black? Are you after my family's money, artifacts, or knowledge? Sirius asked, suspiciously. I already have access to that, Siri. Perseus replied with a smirk, and caused Sirius to become confused at the familiar nickname. He quickly shifted his features, and took his true form. The form of Regulus Arcturus Black. Surprise, big brother. Sirius was gaping in shock. Yes, I defected from the Death Eaters, and even tried opposing Voldemort before having to fake my death to escape. Nysa also took her own true form, and looked like a younger version of Bellatrix Lestrange. Was it weird that I was turned on by that? Well, I'll let you and Regulus talk. I said, before leading Nysa away. When will you go after Ramirez? Advik asked in interest. I'll probably leave fairly soon and do research ahead of time, and when I'm done, I'll drop by Bidencourts and announce my success. It'll demonstrate my skill, power, and the fact that I can get to them, if they find a way around the oaths they agreed to. I responded, my answer getting the approval of Advik and Court. Be careful, Hadrian, I advise you to ambush him or even avoid direct combat. Advik suggested. I'll strongly consider that. I was reluctant to fight him anyway, but I have a strategy that works well for me and I intend to use it. July 4, 1995. 1 week later. It was a busy week full of say and work. I had placed the Black family properties under the Fidelius with myself and Sirius as the secret keepers. I planned to improve the wards on all Black properties when I returned to Britain, but for now I had to focus. I disapparated away to Hector Ramirez's mansion. I arrived moments later and began inspecting the wards around it, once more. Ramirez was a paranoid bastard and kept his wards at full strength after sundown, and considering that I was here to kill him, his paranoia was quite justified. He had incredibly powerful wards that rivaled Hogwarts in strength, but greatly outdated and nowhere near master level work. He didn't trust anyone enough to let them inside his mansion, and that would be his downfall. I created a hole in the wards and slipped inside, while keeping my magic sense on high alert, and disillusioning and silencing myself. I quickly cast my own wards against disapparition, portkeys and a few other forms of travel, and used his ward's power to support and rapidly strengthen them. He would have to collapse all of his wards to collapse mine, and the best part was that my magic channeled in the spells became untraceable by fusing with his family's magic. His ancestors were literally destroying the evidence of their descendants' murder. I quickly incapacitated 2 guards using close-range coma curses and making sure the spellfire was unseen, by waiting until they were out of sight. I quickly placed them in a magically expanded trunks, which were modified to hold prisoners. I spent the next 20 minutes eliminating the large amount of guards, until, finally, I was outside Ramirez's bedroom door. I sensed a large power, which I estimated to be a Tier 2 Archmage, and 2 smaller powers which were merely average. I rendered the door intangible and entered his room. What I saw made my blood boil. His 2 lovers were children who were bleeding out of their eye. Couldn't look at them any longer. He BPD children for power. I telekinetically restrained him, and then hit that swine with a coma curse. I quickly bound him in power restraining objects and placed him in the prison that I created for him. I only wished that it was more painful. Sadly, it was a painless elimination, but I could always cause him some pain later. I cast some healing spells on the children and placed them into a deeper sleep, and when I was done here, I would take them back to their families. I just needed to loot the mansion first. I was hoping for Mayan or Incan battle magic. I badly wanted that power at my disposal and was hoping that it was worth knowing. I spent the last hour looting his mansion, stealing magical knowledge, treasure, and emptying private stashes of money and artifacts. It was very profitable, but I needed to focus on the task at hand. I was back at my hideout, with all of my prisoners and Ramirez in comas, and Ramirez was securely bound. His minions had a decent combined power, and I would most likely absorb it all. Potentium. Tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said. I felt foreign knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released from my sacrifice. I felt Ramirez knowledge enter my mind, and become mine. I felt my body absorb copies of his skill and experience, which wasn't much, but I suddenly passed out, before I could marvel further. I awoke an unknown amount of time later. My body was almost vibrating with power which was begging to be unleashed. Ramirez's death served a great and noble purpose. His knowledge was quite lacking, but I gained some battle magic. Sadly, it was unimpressive. It was still knowledge and would be recorded though. I learned that he used the same rituals that I had access to, but he would beat children to acquire his power, and that was a line that I refused to cross. I set his body aside, and scanned the mind of his chief of security. He was much more knowledgeable and experienced than Ramirez. He lived alone and hoarded magical knowledge to master, and he actually had the power to use most of it. He did know his limitations though, so perhaps that was why. I spent the next 4 hours sacrificing my captured enemies, looting their libraries and other useful objects, and then I returned the girls to their families via a local hospital. And Ramirez. I put him back in his house with his dead guards and made it look like a massacre of his men and then him being toughly tortured. I did castrate the bastard, and was quite proud that I could hit such a small target. I left hours before Mexico's orders arrived, but little did I know that this was just the beginning of my bloody summer. August 4, 1995. So far my summer had been incredibly busy. I killed Ramirez and his people. Burned Palestine to the ground, and killed everyone there. I normally wouldn't have. I sure as hell didn't care for any religion, but I needed to win support and prove my worth. Warlord Wolf was incredibly pleased, and so was his puppet ministry. Unfortunately, everyone in the Alliance heard about how amazing I was and wanted me to aid them. Fortunately, Magical Russia mostly backed down and was merely seeing where the metaphorical line was drawn by testing my allies. Containing 100 wizard attack force within containment wards and burning them alive with fiendfire made the line's position very clear. Naturally, what would my alliance be without Spain wanting me to blacken my soul further? I was lucky that they only wanted Morocco. I persuaded the Mughals to rebel against Morocco's control of Western Sahara, and that got them distracted so the invasion by magical and Mughal Spain could happen, that enabled them to quickly seize control of massive amounts Moroccan of territory. The Moroccan Ministry of Magic quickly fell, and the Mughal military bases were taken out by Greek fire. That way, if anyone investigated, it would appear to be a rediscovered ancient super weapon. I even got them large chunks of Western Sahara. It had been a month since I killed Ramirez, and I had been repeatedly called upon for aid. I was lucky that Nicholas and Peronel, and my grandparents had been joining me when they could. Mostly I had been fighting alone and letting my grandparents train James Moore. I had subjugated Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and completed the conquest of several other small islands. This cleared the Brazilians a path to Mexico via chain apparition or portkey and expanded their territory. Doing this took me 15 days of intense conflict to achieve. I was assassinating opposition to Brazil's expansionist agenda at a rapid rate and installing supporters of it into power. Every so often I had to commit mass murder to eliminate mass opposition in the form of riots, protesters, and rebellions. I hadn't had to destroy an entire ministry yet, but I suspected that I would eventually have to. I was lucky that I could remain in contact with Fudge and visit my family and girlfriends, though my girlfriends naturally preferred to have me near whenever they had urges. I still managed to keep them satisfied and smiling though. I had loaned the ministry usage of not manner for remedial day schools in potions and dada, as well as donating 70,000 galleons for the cause. I was lucky that I remembered one important detail: I beat Albus Dumbledore 3 times, more if you count the other non-combat defeats. I seized his family's magic and cut off both brothers off from it, taking it for myself and greatly improving my ability to wield their family magic for when I did study it. I couldn't help but to imagine the old bastard shaking in impotent rage when I stole his birthright. It seemed that my Brazilian and Argentine friends were truly greedy, though I already knew that people didn't build empires to conquer with due to generosity and mercy. They wanted me to secure Colombia for them, and their countries would split it and use it as a staging ground to either invade or defend against Mexico. I agreed, though I only did so because there was still much that they needed to achieve their goals, and they would most likely need my help. Colombia has refused to bow to our empire. Bidencourt's general said angrily. What was the idiot expecting? They had been bullying all of South America for 50 years. I noticed that Abreu's pet general shared his indignation, and so did their masters. I'll create earthquakes near the coastal and mountainous regions. Maybe them losing millions of lives will make them reconsider. I can also devise some other strategies for mass destruction. I distracted them from their pointless anger, and got their interest. I can target Barranquilla, Cartagena, Buenaventura, and Santa Marta as a warning to surrender. A little over 2 million casualties should be warning enough for them. The generals and their advisors nodded in agreement, and I dissipated away. I arrived at the location I previously scouted, and began centering myself with meditation. I gathered my darker emotions to augment the magic's power and then channeled it into the ground and was rewarded by a large tremor that drained the power of a sorcerer from me, and I channeled even more power into it. Power that only grand sorcerers that the likes of Dumbledore and Voldemort possessed, and even then never into a single spell. I was rewarded by the collapse of several hundred buildings and a collective scream that I heard even from miles away. I held the spell, but didn't channel any more power into it. I needed these allies for James, and I had to keep them interested. The spell needed more power, so I fed some into it. Again, the power of a grand sorcerer. Minutes later and I had completed my mission. Barranquilla was destroyed. I returned to base. It's done. I informed them. Excellent, Bidencourt said with a cruel smile. General, go offer them a last chance to bow. 1 hour later, they killed our messenger. Abreu yelled. You're free to destroy as many of their cities as you desire. He yelled, looking at me. As you wish, I replied, before dissipating away. I would use my other super weapon to destroy my next targets. It worked better for larger targets. I arrived near Cartagena, and quickly prepared myself for a powerful piece of arcane magic. Induco Kylum Neknan Terra Simul. I said, while focusing on the city. I smirked as the meteors rained down through the clouds and dissipated farther away. I calmly watched as the city was obliterated by the wrath of the heavens while suppressing my emotions with occlumency. I had to do this. I needed to keep my allies happy and compliant so they would aid my family. I quickly cleared my mind of my internal debate. When the city was destroyed, I dissipated away. I spent the night laying entire cities to waste with my magic. Bogota. Gone. Medellin. Gone. Cali. Gone. All of the 10 most populated cities were destroyed as an example, and when I was done, I returned to base. Welcome back. Bidencourt said excitedly. I raised an eyebrow in his direction. Your actions have resulted in Panama and Costa Rica defecting to our side, and have enabled us to legally seize control of Colombia in the no-maj side. My country will gain a direct and legal path to Panama in the form of a near straight line to it. Venezuela will absorb part of Colombia and take up that fragment of territory on that side. Peru and Ecuador will grow on the non-magical side as well. Thank you. Our alliance has benefited us greatly. Congratulations, and you're welcome. I said in reply. Well, I'm sure you're tired and wish to see your family. You're free to go, and can count on our support in the future. Bidencourt said, and Abreu nodded in agreement. Thank you, I said, before activating my international portkey. After returning home and waiting for my family to awake, I was finally able to spend some time with them, and shag my girlfriends a couple times. So, how has James progressed under your training? I asked my grandparents. He has progressed well. He can use the most basic form of occlumency and has picked up the family battle magic fairly quickly. We taught him those aura level spells, and that battle magic should help him greatly and he could teach it to allies to give them an advantage. I nodded. That was the reason he was being taught it, in addition to family magic. He has picked up battle transfiguration and charm usage for battle quite well and seems enjoy what he's learning. In time it will be reflexive for him to use. I'm sensing a but. He's getting arrogant. He still loses to us, but he can sense his own progress and realizes that he has few equals for his age. Charles said. I guess I'll just have to humble him then. I said in reply. How is his power growth going? He needs around 40% power growth to become a grand sorcerer, though he isn't being challenged in terms of magical power drain. He's well suited for the training he's being given, and by September he should have made much better progress, and Alexander has already agreed to continue his transfiguration training in his spare time. Although, James would have to also do his other school work in addition to that. Doria replied. Well, barring Voldy using power rituals, James should catch up in terms of power, and that will enable him to fight on more equal footing. Do you think the focused training will help in the skill disparity? Of course. They replied in unison. In hindsight, that was a rather stupid question. My family entered moments later. This of course included Nisa and Fleur. Good morning. I said. Mornin', James said sleepily. Our grandparents were just bragging about your improvement, little bro. Really? He asked excitedly, quickly waking up. Yup. We should duel later. No. James exclaimed, with an undertone of fear. I'm not at full strength. You'll be fine. I responded, causing my grandfather, Charles, to snort. You're still one of the most powerful wizards in the world, Harry. Even at 50% power you still are. He said, with an amused smile. He knew that I just wanted to duel my little brother. I'm not sure how you're even standing, let alone be awake in your current state. Grandfather added, much to my family's concern. I routinely expelled over 50% of power as part of my training. My body and magic can easily handle that, and I recover faster than most. You didn't do that dark ritual, did you? Doria asked, in visible concern. No, of course not. Its costs are far too high. I am planning on using a gray ritual to increase my recovery rate by thrice, when it's around 30% though. I said, causing my grandparents to become visibly awed by my plans. I would recover at a disturbing rate, and that would make me even more formidable. So what will be your summer project? Mom asked. Mainly studying, training, and I'll wipe out the Acromantula in the Forbidden Forest. I need to find out who all is serving Dumbledore and Voldemort, and any of their strategic aims. All I know so far is that they are trying to ally or get the giants to become neutral, and that they are recruiting and protecting the prophecy. I said, and my family nodded in agreement. I really want to know what the prophecy says. James said petulantly. Our parents told us about it shortly after Voldy's return. I feigned surprise, but James wanted to hear it. If mom and dad are okay with it, then we can retrieve it. I said, in slight annoyance. Hearing it wouldn't change anything, but he was obsessed with hearing it. We might as well just get it over with, so that he could move on. That's fine, it's well overdue. Dad said, causing James to smile gratefully. What if Voldemort or Dumbledore get giants on their side? Mom asked in concern. If Voldemort gets them, they die. If Dumbles gets them, he gets exposed and the giants will be wiped out. I replied. I might need to look into the giant issue anyway, they should have decided which side to support by now. Regain your full strength first, Harry, grandfather advised. Oh, I will. I would do that due to paranoia, anyway. Good, he replied. September 4, 1995. I had spent the last month planning, training, studying, and upgrading the wards of all properties to their peak strength. I also wiped out the Acromantula and took their venom, and other parts and placed it under stasis. I still had a decent bit of work to do on the wards, but that would have to wait until I returned to Britain. James had continued making excellent progress, but was nowhere near the needed level. We retrieved the prophecy and replaced it with a false one so that Dumbledore and Voldemort would continue to waste resources trying to protect and acquire it respectively. I was pleased when Sturgis Podmore was captured trying to break into the Department of Mysteries. Sadly, I couldn't have him interrogated, but I was able to drain the desired knowledge from his mind and confirm several suspicions and theories about the Order's work, including membership lists. I was most displeased to discover that Nymphadora was a servant of my family's enemy. I imperioused a Muggle thug to kill Arabella Figg in retaliation, and ordered him to kill himself afterward. The mission was a resounding success. Just like this mission would be. I climbed over the hill and looked downward towards where the giants lived, and saw nothing. I was too late, they had already moved them. Plan B then. Track Hagrid with my tracking spells. I quickly cast the spell and a string of magic was illuminated, and I used my ritual enhanced speed to follow the trail. I found Hagrid and a smaller, but pure giant several minutes later. I drew the Elder Wand and sent two massively overpowered stunners at the pure giant and followed up with restraint spells aimed at its arms and legs. I smirked as it fell onto the ground and targeted Hagrid next. The idiot drew his wand and I launched a lightning curse at him. I telekinetically knocked his wand from his hand and summoned it to me. I barraged him with overpowered stunners and knocked him out with the 10th. I reinforced the restraints on the giant and restrained Hagrid just as well. I finished knocking out the giant, and then I prepped them for harvest and transport. I unstored the vials and other containers. I had a giant to harvest their blood. Skin and bone could be used in a ritual to grant the performer strength and durability on par with the original giant. It wasn't as good as some of the other rituals, but very few could contain giants long enough to sacrifice them. I finished harvesting the giant hours later and turned my attention to a devastated-looking Hagrid. Well, half-giant, you're lucky. I need an undead servant for my family, I said, before gathering my power for my spell. I blasted him with my conversion spell, which I vastly overpowered to compensate for his half-giant nature. I calmly watched the color leave his skin, and his eyes glazed over as he died. I decided that I would provide him with weapons when we returned to Britain. I'd give him weapons that benefited from his immense strength and endurance and return his wand, and make sure that he knew plenty of devastating spells. If I ever needed warriors and didn't care for my reputation, then I would use him on the front lines. He would be damn near undefeatable and kill a lot of my enemies, and he would retain his abilities from his life, making him very hard to injure. I destroyed the evidence of my mutilation of the giant with fiendfire, and had my Hagrid White enter a stasis casket that I had on hand. I shrunk it, and portkeyed away. I arrived back home several minutes later. How'd it go? Charles asked. Whoever they allied with moved them already. I collected Rubius Hagrid as a white though, and harvested some ritual ingredients from a giant with him. The half-giant. What use is he? Doria asked skeptically. Greater than human strength, endurance, and magical resistance. He's skilled with a crossbow, physical combat, and has great magical power. He'll serve his purpose as a dangerous minion once he's outfitted in magical weaponry. I replied. So his diverse skill set and abilities were the reason. Yes. Are my parents home? I've been forgetting to ask father about something. I have 2 of 3 hallows and would like to try something, I said, causing grandfather's eyes to light up. James is in his office. Let's go, he said, gesturing wildly before walking out of the room. Grandmother and I followed. Both of us were greatly amused. We entered Dad's office a minute later, and saw Mom, Dad, and Grandfather waiting impatiently. So, your grandfather tells me you want to try reactivating the Peverell Lordship, Dad said, looking almost as eager as Grandfather, and amusing Mom and Grandmother. Yes, but it will most likely activate under my control and House Potter will lose the cloak. You have to reunite the 3 hallows and bind them to the Lord-to-be, and the wand and stone already are. Dad looked confused, so I continued. The 2 eldest Peverell brothers suffered some difficulties. Antioch was murdered and had the elder wand stolen from him. Cadmus died, but only after witnessing his daughter marry into the worthless Gaunt family and deciding that they were unworthy of wielding the Peverell family magic. So he and Ignotus met and they both agreed that whoever united the 3 hallows and was of Peverell blood may claim the lordship. Through a lot of cunning and strategy, I have 2 of the 3 hallows. Okay, how do you bind them to you? Mom asked. 7 drops of blood and an incantation, I replied. Alright, so it's safe then, Dad said. Of course. Then you can claim the lordship, Dad said, before retrieving the cloak. Grandfather whispered something to him. I, Lord Potter, give you the cloak of invisibility. I took it with a smile and sat it down on a table, and withdrew a ritual knife. I pricked the tip of my thumb with the tip and dripped 7 drops of blood onto the cloak, before stopping the blood flow and healing it. I calmly uttered an incantation in ancient Greek and caused the cloak to briefly glow. I pulled the cloak onto myself, leaving my head exposed, and drew the Elder Wand and Resurrection Stone. I swear upon my life and magic that Peverell blood courses through my veins, and that I am the true master of the 3 hallows. A glow enveloped me and I felt a new weight appear on my hand. I felt a rush of power, and then examined my new ring and checked myself for changes. The hallows were gone. I focused on the Elder Wand, desperately trying to summon it to my hand, and it appeared. Congratulations, Lord Peverell, Grandfather said with a smile. Congratulations, Master of Death, he added in a proud tone, shocking my dad. I've wanted to witness someone ascend to those titles for my entire life, but my brother and father dismissed them as myth. I wish I could laugh in their faces. I thought that sounded like a good idea, so I tried summoning Henry and Fleemont Potter's shades. They appeared moments later, and everyone looked shocked, including the shades. Now you can gloat. Father, brother, meet your great-grandson/grand-nephew. The Lord Peverell and Master of Death. I was right, and you were both idiots and blights upon our bloodlines. Harry has already surpassed and defeated Dumbledore thrice and claimed his house's spoils. He has greater power than Dumbledore, Grindelwald, and both of you and Voldemort combined. I want you to return to hell knowing that the Potter family is gray. Grandfather said, before nodding to me. I released them and watched them disappear. Is Harry really that powerful? Dad asked. Of course. Dumbledore, Father, and Voldemort are only grand sorcerers, and Fleemont was merely sorcerer. He has the potential to surpass Merlin and Morgana. I know that is a dream of his, and he could actually achieve it. The previously mentioned magicals only represent one small part of the magical population, James. Dumbledore and Voldemort aren't omnipotent gods, but merely very powerful within Britain and nowhere near the strongest in the world. How did you get so strong so fast? Mom asked in slight awe. Hard work since the age of 3, I said, omitting what part of it was hard. My mother didn't need to know the specifics. I was hard. I worked up a sweat. That equaled hard work in my mind. I'll be working my powers harder in the upcoming months. I finally have some time to commit to intense training. December 4, 1995. I had worked myself harder than ever since September. I used reality manipulation to take my physical and mental capabilities beyond the human level, and then I pushed my skills in that forbidden art even further. I could now do things seen only in Muggle cartoons, some of which bordered on godlike powers. I finished the warding on all the properties belonging to my family and myself, and all of this incredibly taxing work allowed me to advance to a Tier 6 Archmage rank. I was up to 8.10% faster recovery. I hadn't checked it in a while. I realized that I was far too accustomed to say rituals and the large power gains they afforded me. The sad part was that I couldn't afford to stop until I reached my goal. My alliances had remained stable and I hadn't had to kill in months. I was informed that the Death Eaters had tried bullying the Grey families, and I offered to place them all under the Fidelius charm. The entire faction and their families and their friends. This act of kindness would hopefully tax my magical power more and allow it to grow. Sadly, most of them opted to meet and discuss it, but they also said they would coordinate ahead of time. I didn't know what there was to talk about. I offered them safety and even offered to strengthen their wards to keep my allies happy. I supposed that was why I was invited to Greengrass Manor. Ah, Hadrian, welcome, Alexander said, entering the room followed by his family. Thank you, Lord Greengrass, I said politely in return. Well, I know you're busy working on projects, as am I, so I'll get right to the point. The Grey faction has agreed to let you protect them and improve their wards, but we could have said that in a letter we'd like to negotiate an arrangement like you and Court Delacour have, but with Daphne in mind. You would provide House Greengrass with heirs and seal the alliance by taking the position as consort to Daphne, the future Lady Greengrass. Alexander said. I used my occlumency to remain detached and prevent myself from becoming angry. The old man was trying to offer his granddaughter. And is Daphne agreeable to this, and doing so of her own free will? I asked, looking directly at her. I didn't dare try to invade her mind in her own home, that wouldn't end well. Daphne and her family looked impressed that I was thinking about her well-being. I am. Daphne replied, with a slight blush that quickly vanished. Ah, she wanted me. How cute. Are any Death Eater spawn harassing you at Hogwarts? I asked, and the look on her face confirmed it. I'll want their names later. Are you aware that apart from providing you with heirs, I won't be able to fulfill the other duties of a consort? I'll have several wives and a lot of duties to attend to, that's not even counting continuing my education. I'm not trying to be rude, but I feel you should know this in advance. You might even want to wait for love. As you have guessed, the junior Death Eaters have been verbally insistent that I marry them. They are all emboldened by Voldemort's return and want my family's wealth on their side. They have been given a lot of detention due to their harassment, but that hasn't stopped them. Daphne explained, causing me to look at her grandfather. It will be handled. If need be, they will be expelled, obliviated, and have their magic bound. Alexander said. Good. Daphne, if you're okay with the terms, then I'll discuss it with my other ladies, and if they're okay with it, then I'll sign the contract. Daphne nodded in understanding. Now as for Astoria, Alexander said, are you still looking for a Lady Slytherin? When he asked that, I had to fight the urge to curse him. June 18, 1996. It was a busy first 6 months of the year, but I survived and my allies, and I even achieved a couple small victories, but so did my enemies. Arthur Weasley died protecting the false prophecy, and the twins were expelled for testing joke products on students. They were expelled, obliviated of all magical knowledge, and I personally turned them into squibs with a fun curse. This angered their mother, and she, being the hot-headed idiot she was, attacked me with lethal force, in front of a lot of witnesses, and was quickly killed. Ginny Weasley and her surviving brothers were orphans because of me. I even killed Bill Weasley for his skills. I sacrificed him and benefited quite nicely from his uncommon magical knowledge. I had warded my allies and their family and friends home, and I placed them under the Fidelius. This, coupled with my intense training, had finally enabled me to become a magus and recover 10% faster. I had consented to fathering Daphne's children and taking Astoria as my Lady Slytherin. Nysa only had one condition. Marry her first, and I did, and I used a light say. Magic power ritual to grow mine and hers power by 30%. Unfortunately, Voldemort liberated his sycophants from Azkaban. Fortunately, I persuaded Fudge to sign advanced papers for execution for the escapees. I made sure that he would question them to make sure they actually are the escapees. It wouldn't do for him to kill innocents and get removed from power. I received word that James had a vision of Voldemort torturing Remus, and naturally the idiot went to rescue him. Only my spies in Hogwarts informed me of this event, and gave me time to gather my allies for battle. Fortunately, James was using a slow method of travel and that gave me time to get the Flamels, Court, Wolf, Garcia, Bidencourt, Abreu, Augusta Longbottom, Alexander Greengrass, Regulus Black, and my family together. I was glad that I removed Regulus Dark Mark. That would cause some issues. We waited in the Shadow Realm in the Dark Mirror of the Department of Mysteries. It took me 2 months to get this proficient, but I could move armies far more easily now. It just took quite a bit of power to pull large groups into the Shadow Realm, and it took the power of a sorcerer to pull them all in. I hoped that it would only take that much power to pull them out. I needed a lot of power and to be battle ready to implement my plans. My brother and Cho, and his friends, Neville Longbottom, Luna Lovegood, Ernie Macmillan, Susan Bones, and Hannah Abbott all arrived near the prophecy. James looked around in stupidity for Remus. Someone at Hogwarts had bypassed his occlumency and lured him into a trap, and when I learned who they were, they would die very slowly. The idiots kept looking for Remus before finally giving up. James took the prophecy for some reason. Very good, Potter. Now turn around, nice and slowly, and give it to me. Lucius Malfoy said. I pulled myself and my group out of the Shadow Realm, and we attacked the Death Eaters from behind, quickly killing all but Bellatrix, Yaxley, Dolohov, and Rookwood. They were merely incapacitated. That was easy, I said, revealing myself. I noticed a familiar head of white hair and unmasked them. It was Professor Rosier and she was barely alive. Hello, Professor, how's that say? Why daughter of yours? My snarky comment was rewarded with an impotent glare. I deflowered her by the way, along with Yaxley's, Dolahov's, and Rookwood's daughters. I added, causing several of mine and James' group to laugh. Liar. Dolohov yelled. He's telling the truth actually, Regulus said, revealing himself, in his Perseus White persona. Damn, it is true. Rosier said, recognizing Regulus, and rapidly fading. Yup. I pounded your daughters like common whores and deprived some inbred idiot the joy of being there first. I just wanted you all to die knowing that. Most of your daughters kept coming back to play with my magic wand. Yaxley, you will be pleased to know that your daughter has no gag reflex. Little Calypso was like a vice at first until I ruined her, and I crippled the Rosier family. They can't join Voldemort without dying instantly. Arnaud will essentially kill himself soon. Rosier died, with tears running down her face. Dolohov, your daughter will try anything twice, even if she finds it disgusting. And Rookwood, your daughter was my favorite, and so flexible. Just kill us already, Yaxley yelled. Why yes kill us, P. Potter, if why you're man-y enough. Malfoy said, struggling to talk, with a weak sneer. I'm man enough, your wife can vouch for that. She still shaves an arrow into her pubic hair by the way. Malfoy looked heartbroken. But, since you obviously don't believe me, or I've conveniently lost my ability to read people, I'll show you the memory, because I'm nice. I aimed my wand at him, Legilimens. I said, before trapping him in a loop of several memories. Can I see? Bellatrix asked, getting disgusted looks from almost everyone. What? I've been in prison. Don't worry, Trixie. We have a special treat for you. Neville, do you want to kill her? I asked, and he shakily aimed his wand at her. Neville, don't. Abbott said in shock. Sadly, the silly boy obeyed. Very well. Augusta. I barely finished before she blew a hole Bellatrix's head. That shocked James's entire group, and I noticed that Augusta gave Neville a disapproving look. I suppose I should see if they know anything useful about Voldemort's plans. I said, before ripping through Yaxley's occlumency and ripping quite a bit of knowledge from him. When I finished, he was bleeding from his ears and nose. I repeated the process on the others, only having trouble with Dolohov and Rookwood. I got quite a bit of esoteric magical knowledge from them. I killed Yaxley and faked the deaths of Dolohov and Rookwood, but I really sent them to my prison where I could better integrate the knowledge and skill they possessed. Their skills were far too valuable to waste or risk not fully acquiring them. Dolohov was a student of Durmstrang and could teach dark magic at a master level. Rookwood was a master of several esoteric arts. We should get out of here. The Order and Ministry will be here soon, and I'd prefer to only deal with the Ministry. You're afraid of the Order? James asked in shock. No, I merely find the useless idiots annoying, and they'll harass and likely attack us and get themselves killed, I said, to my group's amusement. We entered the death chamber minutes later, and found the Order waiting. Dumbledore was with them. My group began taking strategic positions. Oh, look, it's the other Dark Lord and his boot-licking sycophants. I discreetly erected some wards to trap them here. The Death Eaters are already dealt with, go be failures somewhere else. What happened to them? Dumbledore asked, though what he suspected of their fate was obvious. We killed them, I said as if it were obvious. I feel like I'm forgetting something, Thaho. Right. This. I fired an overpowered area banisher on the group near Dumbledore, and knocked McGonagall, Moody, Lupin, Shacklebolt, and Dumbledore himself back into a wall, and went on the attack. I hit McGonagall in with the same spell that I hit Dolohov and Rookwood with, and she was teleported to my prison, but appeared to be disintegrated. I blasted a hole into Shacklebolt's chest and cut off Lupin's legs with my Fiendfire-infused cutting curse and then teleported him to my prison. 3 threats were dealt with in less than 20 seconds. I focused on Dumbledore and deflected his ropes at Moody and sent a wandless blasting at Moody and one from my wand at Dumbledore. I followed up with an overpowered stunner at Dumbledore, and teleported Moody to my prison. Dumbledore avoided my stunner, so I teleported him to my prison and into a cell prepared specially for him. I took in my surroundings and discovered that the Order was defeated. Nymphadora was bound and silenced. I never would have thought you would work against your family, Nymphadora. I lied, causing her to glare impotently because I used her full name. It's actually quite shocking and out of character, and that leads me to 2 theories. I cast detection spells and found a love potion keyed to Remus Lupin, and loyalty potions keyed to Albus Dumbledore. Love potions keyed to Lupin, and loyalty potions keyed to Dumbledore. After the DMLE is informed, we can give her a flushing potion. They potioned my cousin. Sirius questioned angrily, with a mad gleam in his eyes. I noticed that everyone but the Flamels looked shocked. They gave me a knowing look. Flashback. I had managed to easily bypass Tonk's wards and even create myself an untraceable back door through her wards. I placed several spells on Tonk's property to frame Dumbledore and Lupin, among them eavesdropping, tracking and spying spells. All cast with Dumbledore and Lupin's magical signature. My target just entered her house, looking very tired. Hello, Nymphy, I said, before stunning her. Welcome home. I began my work. I modified her memories, forced a loyalty and love potion down her throat, keyed to Dumbledore and Remus Lupin respectively. All I would have to do is keep administering the potions, but that would be easy to achieve. This would turn more people against Dumbledore, and drive Nym away from Lupin and the Order, and shift her loyalty to me. End flashback. The drama isn't over yet. I sense a grand sorcerer in the atrium and there is only so few of those in the world. I'll be back in a few minutes, I said, before disapparating into atrium. I arrived moments later. Hello, Tom, I said, when I arrived. He dispelled his invisibility. Come to join me, Harry. Voldemort asked, in his high, cold voice. Are you serious, or are you actually that delusional? I asked, angering him. Well, at your age it might be senility. Well, if you won't join me Avada Kedavra. Voldemort yelled. I just deployed my vengeance shield and let it hit. It rebounded on Voldemort and he was forced to dodge. I sent a barrage of bone breakers at him, which he deflected into the atrium wall and responded with a lightning curse that I met with a rope of fire. Honestly, I wasn't even trying. I was just stalling the idiot. So where are my Death Eaters and the Order? Voldemort asked. Your entire group is dead and most of the Order is too. I do love revenge, and you did deceive me in my first year. Liar. Voldemort yelled, before barraging me with dark curses. I calmly deflected them. Luckily the minister and his bodyguards entered at this time and saw Voldemort dueling me. Nope. Entirely truthful, Tommy boy. I said, before counter-attacking as more people entered the atrium. I quickly turned the duel to my favor and broke his left leg and struck him across the chest with a rope of fire, before actually cutting his right leg off and causing him to fall onto the ground. He dissipated away, and I laughed. I holstered my wand and went to greet Minister Fudge. Was that enough proof that Voldemort has returned? I asked Fudge. Yes, you were right. What can I do though? The people will be out for my head. Some might be, but Dumbledore is neutralized and Voldemort is exposed. Several Order members were caught, and Nymphadora Tonks was found to be under loyalty potions keyed to Dumbledore and a love potion keyed to Remus Lupin. This will chip away at his support. Several Death Eaters were killed by myself and my allies, and I personally killed Dumbledore, Moody, Lupin, McGonagall, and Shacklebolt. You have several resolved threats that occurred during your administration, and I can make other suggestions to purge the Ministry of Death Eaters and sympathizers. I'll go oversee the arrests. Madame Bones said, revealing herself. Susan's here too, by the way. I said, causing her to become concerned. She's fine. None of them even got to fight. Thank you. I'll go see to that. Madame Bones said, before quickly leaving. Harry, Fudge said, trying to get my attention. I just realized that I was looking at her ass. What were your ideas to purge the ministry? Veritaserum questioning. Oaths on their lives and magic that they are not Death Eaters, supporters, or sympathizers. Random checks for the Dark Mark, with no one being exempt, including yourself and members of the Wizengamot. I said to Fudge, before turning to Scrimgeour. How are the remedial schools going? Very well. The 12-hour days have achieved quick results, the damage done by the cursed opposition and that Death Eater is largely undone. We have 138 Auror candidates, 94 have retaken their potions owls and newts, and 89 have retaken their Dada owls and newts. So far only 80 are ready for the 3-year Auror training. Excellent. How much can you reduce the training period without affecting Auror quality? I only ask due to Voldemort's return and the upcoming war. We can't reduce it much at all. The character and aptitude tests are essential and we can't train the candidates too hard without magically and physically exhausting them. Concealment and disguise is very important and stealth and tracking is also. I deployed spells against eavesdropping. You could ask the Unspeakables if they have stronger versions of time turners. If they do, I can put the academies under the Fidelius, so they can work in secret. I can also lend my magical power to fortify the wards of the ministry and other key infrastructure. That idea seemed to be well received. Those are good ideas, and your power would greatly strengthen the wards. It wouldn't hurt to have them upgraded either. Scrimgeour said. I agree. Fudge said eagerly. I'm sure you're tired, Harry, so we will owl you soon and schedule the upgrades. Thank you, Minister. I do need to go claim some spoils under the ancient laws of magical warfare. I said, and they nodded. I had finally gotten away from my family and allies so that I could deal with my prisoners. I had already claimed the minor titles of nobility from Yaxley and indirectly took control of his daughter, who I intended to give powerful children to. Soon I would have Rookwood and Dolahov's daughters and get to spread my seed around and bolster their bloodlines. Soon, I would add vast amounts of skill and experience to my own and destroy several threats to my goals. I just had to deal with some unpleasantness first. I entered the prison area of Gryffindor Castle, and was met by my angry prisoners. Welcome to Gryffindor Castle. Sadly, you're all here to die and won't receive a tour. Who's first? Why are you doing this, Harry? Lupin questioned in shock, no doubt remembering me as an innocent child. To defeat Dumbledore and help along Voldemort's defeat so that my little brother can move on. I have dreams and the defeat of Dumbledore will open some doors for me. They already believe he's dead, that all of you are dead. You forgot one thing, my boy, Dumbledore said, with a condescending smile. Fox. Wards against Phoenixazond. He was just captured because of you. I've been looking for a phoenix for my studies into immortality, so thank you. I said, causing Dumbledore to become horrified at the thought of an immortal me. You seek immortality to rule then? Dumbledore questioned. Not by the means you, Gellert or Tom would, but yes. Think bigger, Dumbledore. I said, causing him to do so. Just imagine if all magicals were immortal, but had to pay a fee to remain so. I could sail life itself. I just need to complete a few smaller goals to eliminate smaller threats like all of you. Rest assured, Dolohov, Rookwood, that I'll take good care of your daughters and ensure your bloodlines continue. I decided to tackle the biggest threat first, and stunned Dumbledore. I removed him from his cell and levitated him to the ritual room. When I arrived, I placed him into the ritual circle and placed him under a coma curse. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said. I felt foreign knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released and mostly absorbed into me. I felt my body absorb copies of his knowledge, skill, and experience, and then I passed out. I awoke minutes later and removed and destroyed Dumbledore's body. I gained Dumbledore's magic and then some. The ritual only sacrificed what was necessary and converted the rest of his soul into power for me. I returned to my prison, eager for my next victim. Well, who's next? I asked, and no one volunteered. Fine. Then I'll perform the traditional villain monologue and give you time to escape. I want to assure you all that you will die. Hated Remus. I keyed a love potion to you and gave it to Nymphadora. I keyed loyalty potions to Dumbledore and gave them to her, and by tomorrow you will both be regarded as worse than Death Eaters. Why? Remus questioned me in shock. Defeating Dark Lords is good publicity. Dumbledore was the perfect candidate. An example of the ultimate Dark Lord. At least once I ruined his reputation, anyway. He controlled Hogwarts, the Wizengamot, and influenced the ICW. It was all there and just needed the right changes. To be fair, I am a legit Dark Lord Slayer. I killed Grindelwald when he taught at Durmstrang, and his family who tried enslaving me. Anyway, you're distracting me. I castrated Remus as punishment. You may be wondering, why kill Grindelwald's family? Well, at the time it was just collateral damage, but recently I've heard whispers of thought dead wizard alive and preparing for revenge. His name, Herpo the Foul. I intend to kill him, and use the fame to bed more women. I said, getting derisive snorts all around. Oh, and deflower pures and say. Rituals and bolster my power even further. I'm a 15-year-old magus now, imagine what I can achieve by age 50. I added, causing the Death Eaters be awed by that idea, and the Order members to be horrified. I'm bored. I'll kill Lupin next. I hit him with a coma curse and removed him from his cell. I repeated the ritual on Lupin, but omitted the transference of magic and life force. I did have his soul destroyed for power though, that would be safe and wouldn't transfer his curse to me. When I woke up, I removed and destroyed his body, and returned for my next victim. So continue my monologue or put you out of your misery? I asked. Monologue. Dolohov replied. Right. I intend to discover just how much magic a human being can handle. How many times can a magus multiply their power before being overloaded? That's the big question for me. I even created an improved version of the power measuring spell with a rank after magus, but it requires multiplying your base magus power 7-fold. This is boring. I'm gonna go ahead and kill Moody. I said, before hitting him with a coma curse. He didn't even try resisting. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said. I felt Moody's knowledge enter my mind and become mine, as his magic flowed into me and grew mine further. I felt my body absorb copies of his knowledge, skill, and experience, and then I passed out. I awoke minutes later and reviewed my recently acquired knowledge. Dumbledore was incredibly knowledgeable, and if he had my power he would be truly invincible, but now I had his knowledge, skill, and experience, and should be invincible. Moody was a master Auror who once stalemated Voldemort, even when Voldemort had greater power, and that made it all the more impressive. He had warded against Voldemort previously by expelling 90% of his power whenever he could in advance of an attack. Lupin was proof that werewolves deserved the benefits of a Hogwarts education, and he could have easily acquired a mastery in charms in addition to his Dada mastery. I destroyed Moody's body, saving his eye for study, and returned to my prison. Well, McGonagall, you're next. I said, before hitting her with a coma curse. 14 minutes later, I had just awoken from my ritual-induced sleep, and began reviewing my new knowledge. She was an immensely talented mistress of transfiguration, but not on Dumbledore's or Alexander's level. Very skilled at charms and could easily teach the class. A journeyman's in Dada, but preferred to focus on transfiguration. She could easily teach potions and ancient runes up to owl level. This was a beneficial night and it wasn't even over yet. I repeated the ritual on Dolohov and then, I retrieved Rookwood and allowed him to be awake. Feel free look at it. I said, watching his expression as he began studying it. A ritual of sacrifice that transfers magical energy, knowledge, skill and experience. It even uses the excess energy from souls to empower you further. A perfect blend of several fields of magic. It's beautiful. Rookwood gushed. Minutes later, doing a truly excellent fanboy impression. You could sacrifice thousands of muggles and attain even more power. Their souls would provide raw unused magic and you could transfer it to yourself and actually use it. Yes, it is. Now imagine all my victims' skills at my disposal. Dumbledore, Grindelwald, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes from the 1980s, and then all my victims killed today. Severus Snape too. His potion skills reinforced my own greatly. Rookwood's expression was one of awe. He was a true lover of the dark arts and would sink to any level to experiment. I was lucky that he hadn't created a Horcrux. I did make a mental note of his suggestion though, it was a great one. I bound him with a powerful curse and placed him into the ritual circle. I decided to allow him to observe the ritual as a reward for his suggestion. Potentium. Tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said. I felt Rookwood's knowledge enter my mind and become mine, as his magic flowed into me and grew mine further. I felt my body absorb copies of his knowledge, skill, and experience, and then I passed out. I awoke minutes later and destroyed his body, and dissipated away. I arrived at the Phoenix prison and inspected it. Hope you like your new home, though I doubt that you do. I received an angry cock in reply. Your master is dead, his good name and legacy tarnished, and most of the order is dealt with too. I strongly suspected that he was a good person, you know, but his actions brought that into question and the best course of action was killing him and making sure that he was no longer a threat. I paused. In short, his own actions resulted in his death. I dissipated back home, while thinking why did I gloat to a bird. When I arrived, I found my parents waiting for me. We were starting to get worried about you. Where were you? Mom asked. Checking my stores of Veritaserum and other potions. I may need to donate some to the ministry for the Death Eater purge. I wasn't expecting anyone to be waiting on me, or I wouldn't have taken inventory of all my potions. I said, opting for the half-truth approach. I already had taken inventory of my potions. Well, several members of the Light faction want you to place them under the Fidelius charm like you did the Grey faction. Some were angry that you didn't offer it to them first, and claimed you favored another faction over your own. Dad said, with an unreadable look. I'll place them under the Fidelius, and make my position clearly Grey. I'll move the Peverell lordship to the Grey faction, and tell them to bugger off. Harry. Mom exclaimed. Fine. I'll tell them to. How else can I phrase that? I asked, causing Dad to smirk, and Mom to glare. I'll just let my actions do the talking then. That would be for the best. Mom said, sternly. Which ones called me a traitor to the Light faction? Lords Macmillan and Smith. Dad replied. Good to know. I said, already plotting. There were so many fun possibilities to ruin, hinder, or humiliate them. It was surprisingly quiet since the Department of Mysteries. Only Dementor attacks had occurred and I had destroyed 50 of the demons and forced them into a retreat. I placed all of the Light faction, except for Macmillan and Smith, under the Fidelius. Excluding them caused them to fume in impotent anger and make empty threats against me, but I did have them watched as a precaution. I learned that Lord Macmillan was seeking Susan Bones for his son, but his son was indifferent and didn't care either way, but did care for her. Lord Smith wanted Hannah Abbott and Susan Bones for his worthless son Zacharias, so I just had to take that from him. Lord Smith was rather cruel and wanted to hurt Susan, so that stirred my sympathies. I advised Augusta to seal Neville and Hannah's relationship with a contract. All parties involved were agreeable, and that was my revenge against Smith for threatening me. I opened negotiations to ensure the Bones line continued and wasn't absorbed, by providing Susan or Amelia with heirs. Or both. I wasn't picky. I would be meeting with them today, but I was optimistic about my chances. My political maneuvers had worked well. Fudge had remained in power and was taking my advice. I upgraded the power of the ministry's wards and discovered that it had a bloody massive ward stone and could handle Magus level wards. I, naturally, got them to full strength in a week. However, doing that forced me to realize that I needed to get stronger. I hated not being able to break wards that I contributed to, it was a weakness and therefore a threat to me. My brother's training had continued this summer, and he had made incredible progress since the end of the Triwizard tournament. He was easily holding his own against our grandparents and would eventually be ready to fight both at the same time. He was already defeating Mom, Dad, and Sirius. Albeit barely, but that was still very impressive. He only needed a 15% power growth to become a Grand Sorcerer, and he should have attained that coveted rank by September, if he worked hard. My parents seemed to have used my gift to them. A book on light or gray say. Rituals, to bolster their power by 30%. Apparently my inappropriate gift didn't go unused, and that helped them get to Warlock level power. Sadly, my investigation into who tampered with my brother's mind had gone nowhere. Dumbledore and Snape were both out of Hogwarts, though Dumbledore may have sneaked in, and Snape was dead. That meant there could be another unknown Legilimens at Hogwarts, and that was concerning because they were either pro-Dumbledore or pro-Voldemort. I knew that I couldn't just ask everyone to swear an oath on their magic, professing their innocence. That would cost our side support. Now, I want you to detect the magic on this box, I said, to James. Use only your magic sense, tuning out your other senses, and then sensing the intent and purpose behind the magic. He was taught basic magic sense a week ago, and could already do far more than most, but he could do better and possibly sense wards instead of just non-verbal spells. The intent is to stun or incapacitate. James said, minutes later. Good. Now remove the curse, I said, and he quickly did so. Open the box. He did. Now detect and break the spells on the box inside it. He sighed and got started. The intent is inflict third-degree burns, James said, giving me a wary look. Anything else? I asked as a hint, and caused him to re-inspect it. A fail-safe that reactivates the curse on the first box and strengthens it. I have to remove the failsafe. You have to remove both at the same time. How? James asked in shock. An overpowered counter spell, I replied. I kept it simple for you to break, but still challenging. My magical mirror vibrated, and I quickly extracted it. Voldemort has mobilized his giants into the West Country. We count 10 along with 2 Death Eaters and Voldemort himself. We have sent a Patronus message to the DMLE. They're in Devon now, and the Flamels are en route. Doria closed the message. We'll pick up the lesson later, I said, before quickly disapparating out. I arrived near my grandparents and the Flamels, and was pleased that our mirrors acted as beacons to travel to our track. Fortunately, we were a safe distance away. Shall we attack? I asked, already gathering my power and controlling the weather above the giants. I noticed Nicholas and Perenelle's eyes widen. My grandparents nodded, and I willed lightning bolts to strike down 5 giants. Moments later, there was success. And the lightning had even burned holes into their heads. I quickly repeated the process and slew the other giants. We disapparated closer to the Death Eaters, and I quickly blasted Voldemort into a tree, while my grandparents slew his minions. Hey you filthy son of a near squib. Fancy seeing you here. I barraged him with the vilest curses I knew, but he quickly disapparated away. I sensed his arrival point and fired a custom torture curse. It hit and he screamed in agony. Blood poured from his nose and eyes. I released it and let him fall onto the ground. Did that hurt? If so, please rate the pain on a scale 1 to 10. I tested it on you and need feedback or constructive criticism. The curse is inspired by the Horcrux creating spell, and literally broke the soul and then undid the damage to it. The result? Pain much worse than the Cruciatus curse. Harry, we're going back home, Charles said. I nodded in understanding. It wouldn't do for the ministry to catch them. Not only would I lose family, but it would cause major issues for me and I would have to neutralize the ministry, Tom, any rebellions against me, and the ICW. It really wasn't worth the risk. Voldemort, who I shall now strive to refer to as Tom, was no longer lordly enough to merit me calling him Voldemort. I actually found him to be quite weak. Pathetic, I said, as Tom still lay in the dirt. I dreamed of surpassing you and Dumbledore, and now you're an ant compared to me. His eyes widened and he disapparated away. Moments later, the oars apparated in. Bloody hell. Potter, you did all of this? Scrimgeour asked in a combination of shock and horror. I killed the giants and beat Voldemort again, but he retreated like the coward he was. The Flamels took out his thugs. Thank you. Again. It seems you have a knack for defeating dark wizards. Are you sure I can't convince you to become an Auror? I'm positive. And I need to go. I have an important meeting later today. Scrimgeour nodded, and I disapparated away. I arrived back where I was teaching James basic curse breaking and advanced magic sense, and saw my grandparents supervising his continued training. How'd it go, Harry? James asked. It went well. 10 giants dead, 2 Death Eaters dead, and Voldemort disapparated away, after I had beaten him into the ground. I said, causing James to become slightly angry. When can I fight Voldemort? He asked, eager to prove himself. I think that after this year you should be ready, but ideally after your newts. That would maximize your chances of victory without waiting too long. I'd like you to outright dominate him or fight him on equal footing. That way, when you win, you can technically claim the title Light Lord and even have a fearsome reputation. I said, placating him. What can I do to improve? James asked. Your speed needs major work, there are rituals for that. You need to be able to defeat both of our grandparents in a duel, that would be a good way to assess your progress. Apart from those two things, you need to improve your skills in occlumency, and continue your training and learning. I'm a seeker. I'm probably faster than you. He said angrily, before finding my wand pointed at his face less than half a second later. You're humanly fast. Not inhumanly fast. Voldemort and I are both inhumanly fast, but I'm faster than he is. James looked sufficiently cowed and humbled by my display and words. Hours later, I had just arrived near Bones Manor, eager to begin discussions for Susan's hand. And the rest of her too. Welcome, Hadrian, Susan said, with a blush. We quickly got the pure blood mannerisms out of the way. A pleasure to see you again, Susan. I replied, making sure that I was polite, gentlemanly, and charming, but not overly charming. I didn't want to scare her off, after all. Please, come in. My auntie will be joining us in a moment, she had to receive a briefing on a giant attack. Oh, I asked. Yeah, a really powerful wizard killed 10 giants and forced Voldemort to retreat. That's all I heard before I was shooed out of her office. Susan said, obviously impressed and not even realizing it was me that did all of that. Impressive. Are you enjoying your summer so far? I guess. I can't really go out much due to the state of things, I'm a target too. Susan said sadly. Sadly, that will at least last until James finishes his newts. He's undergoing extreme training, in addition to his class work, and already working as hard as he can. I want to make sure he's ready before the big fight. I said, to Susan's agreement. A good idea, Hadrian, Amelia said, making her presence known. With you as a trainer, he'll grow immensely powerful. I heard about your actions earlier, she said, to Susan's confusion. He slew 10 giants, and had Voldemort on the ground beaten and crying. I wish I could have seen that. Thank you, Amelia. It wasn't really that impressive, just some knowledge that I was fortunate enough to acquire. From some traders to the Athens School of Divine Magic. I said, causing some jaws to drop. Damn, Amelia said in shock. That is very powerful magic. No Dark Lord has ever truly claimed Greece because of its existence. I'm getting sidetracked though. Why don't you tell me why you're seeking a contract out of the blue when you've only talked to my niece a few times in your entire life? Well, I overheard some people that I recently decided to annoy talking about absorbing 2 bloodlines. One even talked about using Susan as a broodmare and making you watch as she was broken and deprived of her chance to fulfill her dreams. His son found that hilarious. The other wanted something similar as well as a housewife for his son and to absorb house bones, apart from that his intent didn't seem as malicious as the other. The second son wasn't that interested. Susan looked horrified that someone would do that to her. Amelia looked pissed. I, however, will provide house bones with heirs for any titles known and unknown. All I want in return is to remove their access to family magic coming from my side, and the obvious pleasure derived from conception. I added, causing Susan to blush and Amelia to look amused at her niece's innocence. If Susan is agreeable, then I will sign the contract. Amelia said. I'm okay with it, but I want to know who said those things. Susan said, and Amelia began signing the contract. Lord Smith and Zacharias wanted to humiliate, break, and degrade you. Lord Macmillan wanted you as a housewife and to provide his son with heirs. I said, as Amelia finished signing the contract. I had already signed it. I wish that I could retaliate against them without losing my job or having house bones destroyed. Amelia said angrily. Susan seemed to agree, so I decided to move forward with a few plans. You can. I said, piquing their interest. You could even reduce the Smith family's magical power, somewhat. Sadly, House Macmillan and Clan Macmillan aren't viable options for retaliation. Explain. Amelia said, all but ordering me to do so. I was strangely aroused by that, and made a mental note to seek help from a mind healer. Me being submissive was unacceptable under any circumstances. You and Susan are descended from Helga Hufflepuff's firstborn and heir. The Smiths are all descended from her second-born and a squib who was absorbed into the Smith line. You or Susan can claim the Hufflepuff house and strip them of the Hufflepuff family magic. You also control 25% of Hogwarts, though it's not enough to counter the heir of Gryffindor and Slytherin. And who are they? The only heir of Slytherin I've heard of is Voldemort. Amelia said, in concern. They are one person. Me. I said, to the shock of the Bones women. I won the Gryffindor lordship, which was dormant and forgotten, from Arthur Weasley. I won the Slytherin and Gaunt lordships from Tom Marvolo Riddle, also known as Lord Voldemort, Tommy Boy, Voldy, Moldy Shorts, Snakeface, and the Dark Wanker. Suffice it to say, Voldemort is no longer heir of Slytherin any longer. That's good news, Amelia said in relief. When will you announce your lordships? Whenever I feel is best. I may need to announce them to provoke Tom, or to prevent a bill's passage. I'm really just saving it for a special occasion. Will you be wanting to announce Susan's betrothal? It would both paint a target on her back and ward off those seeking her hand. We should announce it at the next Wizengamot meeting. Susan should be safe under the Fidelius, and her betrothal to you should ensure no one is foolish enough to attack her. Unless they have a death wish, of course. Amelia said, and both Susan and I nodded. It was good logic, and I would butcher anyone who came after her. I did need her for my plans after all. August 25, 1996. It was finally the date of the Wizengamot meeting, and I had spent the last 24 days wisely. I underwent another ritual using reality manipulation and granted myself truly superhuman abilities. I furthered my studies with emphasis on growing my power further. Sadly, I learned that I could only grow my power 10% every 3 months. Any more would risk overload, but I was free to use that in addition to my training. If my suspicions were correct, then I would have plenty of time to build up my powers. Tom was likely to overcompensate for his weakness with more minions. This August meeting of the Wizengamot will now begin, Augusta began. Before we get to business, Madam Bones has an announce to make. Thank you, Madam Chief Warlock, Amelia began. I recently betrothed my niece, Susan, to Hadrian Potter, who agreed to provide House Bones with heirs. She said, causing Lord Smith and Macmillan to become angry. You betrothed her to a dark wizard? Lord Smith questioned angrily. Gray. I called out in annoyance. Who my niece marries is none of your business. Amelia said coldly. You're a traitor to the light faction. Because she didn't curse her niece with the shame of marrying into your weak bloodline. I asked, with a smirk. We're descended from Helga Hufflepuff. You're descended from her second-born, and a squib that was absorbed into House Smith by your ancestor. I said, snidely, angering the imbecile. Yes, I made sure to study the ancestry of your bloodline. I found it greatly unimpressive. I added, causing him to draw his wand and point it at me. I casually disarmed him with wandless magic. Did I mention that I found the lost descendants of Helga Hufflepuff's firstborn and heir? I asked, catching everyone's interest. Amelia stood up with a smirk. Yes, I was quite surprised, but I was accepted as the lady of the house. Lord Smith looked apoplectic. I'm pleased to say that Houses Bones and Hufflepuff have a bright future with powerful descendants. Which is far more than the Smiths could do, they're barely more powerful than their squib ancestor. I added, causing several people to laugh at Lord Smith, who glared murderously at me. Go to hell, dark wizard. Lord Smith said, angrily. I rolled my eyes in response, and nodded to Father Gray. I replied, I move to expel House Smith from the Light faction. I won't work with someone who slanders my heir. Dad said, angrily, causing shock from the Light faction. I oppose this. Lord Macmillan said, Lord Smith is entitled to his opinion, and if Lord Potter can't handle it, then perhaps he should leave the Light faction. That won't end well for the Light faction, I said in sing-song voice, but still conveyed warning. You can't do a damn thing to us, boy. Lord Macmillan said angrily, and was rewarded by a cruel smirk from me. Perhaps the Light faction should choose who to expel. I replied in a bored tone. I knew it would fail. Lord Smith was too politically threatening to expel and make an enemy of, and he was useful to them. I had another way though. Yes. A vote. All those in favor of expelling House Smith. Dad, Amelia, Lord Abbot, and Augusta raised their hands, and my allies smirked. There was still a mere one vote that would oppose us, so Dad would be leaving the Light faction. In that case, House Potter withdraws from the Light faction. Dad said, before moving to a true neutral section. The Grey faction offers you a place. Lord Greengrass said. I accept, Dad replied. Over the next 2 minutes House Longbottom joined the Grey faction, followed by House Abbott, Bones, and Hufflepuff. I'd like to take this time to reveal my possession of the Gryffindor lordship, and its 4 votes. I said, revealing the ring. It has 4 votes and will be in the Grey faction. That should put the Grey faction at 18 votes. The Light and Dark factions each have 2. As I said, that won't end well for the Light faction. I finished with a smirk, and sat down. The Light faction looked like idiots, and they were, so it suited them quite well. Any other business? I moved to strip the Potters of all wealth, assets, and titles. Lord Smith said, hatefully. I demand an honor duel to avenge this insult to my family. I shouted, angrily. This low-bred, magically weak piece of trash dares question our place here. I have more magic in my little finger than the entire Smith bloodline. I said, as Lord Macmillan tried calming down Lord Smith. Speak, coward. Or do you need your master's permission? I asked, nodding to Lord Macmillan. I had to divide them to achieve this. Smith made a huge mistake and I had to capitalize on it. Finally, Lord Smith stood up. I accept, he said, with a sneer. I'll kill you, and keep your whores as my pets. He was going to die for even thinking that. The idiot seemed to have realized that, because he suddenly looked very afraid. Gentlemen, please step into the center and I will deploy the protective spells. Augusta said. I promptly did so, and Lord Smith did the same, but far less confidently. Begin when ready. Lord Smith began with a barrage of blasting curses. I just calmly cast my shield and waited for the idiot to finish. He stopped several seconds later, and I counter-attacked. I quickly blew his legs off with my blasting curse, and did the same to his arms. I calmly walked closer to inspect my work, and castrated him on my way over. What could I say? I believed in bringing gifts when I came over uninvited. Hadrian Potter is the winner. Augusta loudly proclaimed. Yes, I claim House Smith as spoils. I said, angering Lord Macmillan. Sadly, he was too intelligent to be provoked into rash action, which was unfortunate for me. Congratulations, Lord Peverell Gryffindor. Augusta said, with a smile. Is there any other business? None spoke, so she dismissed us. I began walking out of the ministry, quite pleased with myself. I had added quite a bit of wealth to my own, and that didn't even account for magical knowledge. If all went well, then I would be damn near invincible soon. I exited the ministry and sensed a magical power that was nearly equal to my own. I quickly dissipated away, but not before being tagged with a tracking spell by the unknown Magus. Moments later, I arrived in location far from civilization. I needed a place to fight this threat without being seen. Another moment later another man arrived. He was about 6 foot, 7 inches tall and built like a pro wrestler. He had jet black hair and had scars all over his face and arms. The rest of him was cloaked in pure gold ancient Greek battle armor. Who are you? I asked angrily. I hated being attacked. Ares. The Greek god of war. Ares said, with a sneer. He seemed to be disappointed when I didn't show fear. They're real, was my only thought. And what do you want? I asked, in annoyance. It's really quite simple, boy. You stole our knowledge, killed our descendants, and then were idiotic enough to use our knowledge in public. I'm here to kill you for your crimes against Olympus. He said, before charging me, brandishing his sword. I quickly dodged and summoned the sword of Gryffindor, and counter-attacked, cutting into his arm. Naturally, the cut rapidly healed, but that was okay, it was poisoned. I quickly parried his next strike, and siphoned his stamina from him, and kicked the back of his leg with my full, ritual-enhanced strength. I was rewarded by a sickening cracking noise and I cut off his right hand and hit him with a wandless blasting curse, at point-blank range. I smirked when he was knocked back into a boulder. I followed up with a barrage of stunners, but he teleported out of the way. He appeared several feet away, and his hand was already regrowing, but he seemed to already be feeling the effects of the basilisk venom in him. He charged again, and I cast a lightning curse at him, which stopped him in his tracks and caused him unimaginable agony, as his gold armor acted as the perfect conductor. He eventually collapsed a minute later, and I quickly stunned him. I quickly bound him in power-suppressing restraints, removed the tracking spell, and dissipated us away. We arrived at Black Manor and I quickly stripped him of his armor and placed him into the ritual circle under the effects of a coma curse. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said. I felt foreign knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released and mostly absorbed into me. The shock of absorbing such power caused me to scream in agony. I felt my body absorb copies of his knowledge, skill, and experience, and then I passed out. I awoke an unknown amount of time later, sore all over, but with a lot of magical power coursing through me. I felt both amazing and terrible at the same time. It was almost like when I had Marathon say, with Nysa and Fleur and wanted to pass out from exhaustion. I gained a lot from this ritual. A massive strength, stamina, durability, and speed upgrade. I nearly doubled my magical power. Sadly, his magical knowledge wasn't very impressive, because he preferred more manly forms of combat, but I was still happy with the results. June 27, 1998. It had been nearly 2 years since the killing of Ares, and I had only gotten stronger and more knowledgeable. I could now recover 20% faster. I was quite saddened to learn that it wasn't enough. Tom had been quietly building up his forces, recruiting mercenaries, creatures, and slaughtering people and turning them into inferi. All of my strength and ability was worthless, until I began picking off his servants and interrogating them. That was how I learned of his plans. He had recruited large numbers of trolls, werewolves, Urklings, and even vampires. He had thousands of allies, all of which were very powerful and dangerous, and even one could easily kill 10 of our allies. We were lucky, or very unlucky, that he was saving his forces for one large assault. Which brings us to today. The day of the Battle of Hogwarts. The day James will defeat Tom, and hopefully replace Dumbledore as Light Lord. He was finally strong enough, and could defeat our grandparents with reasonable ease. We couldn't postpone the day any longer without risking the complete destruction of Great Britain. The students are all safely home now, Hadrian, Augusta informed me. I nodded in reply and looked towards my little brother. He looked nervous. Thank you, Augusta. It's just another fight to death, James, but I think it's time we send Tommy Boy a message. I said, before turning to Amelia. All combat personnel is on Hogwarts grounds. Yes, and the ministry is sealed and under the Fidelius. All magical locations are warded to the safest limit. Riddle has no choice but to either cower away or face us on the battlefield of our choosing. Amelia replied. Good. We just need the bait him. I said, before kneeling down onto the ground. I began channeling my magic into the ley lines, and projecting my consciousness through them as Legilimency. I found his mind minutes later. Hello, Tom, I said into his mind. Potter. Get out of my head, you filthy half-blood. I induced Cruciatus-level pain in him. I wasn't going to indulge his delusion of superiority and suffer insults from that pest. We both know that my blood is more pure than yours, you idiot. We have destroyed all of your Horcruxes, and have taken measures to prevent your goals. I have won the Slytherin and Gaunt lordships from you by destroying your little items. Unfortunately, for you, you only have 4 hours to get here, or I'll strip you of the Slytherin and Gaunt family magic, expose your true last name and brand you a lying muggle born. Oh, and you can only deactivate our measures from inside Hogwarts. What measures? Tom questioned angrily. Tell me the name of even one muggle born and one magical settlement. There was silence, he was unable to name one. I protected all of your targets against you. Tommy boy, you have no choice but to face us directly or abandon all of your goals. I'll see you in 3 hours, and I will kill everyone you love before your very eyes, and then, and only then, will I kill you. You'll try, you low-bred piece of trash. I said, before ending the chat. He'll be here in 3 hours. We spent the next 3 hours preparing the defenses for the attack, and ensuring we had a major advantage, even if we were greatly outnumbered. Finally, after nearly 4 hours, his army arrived due to coordinated portkeys. I counted 70 giants, hundreds of Death Eaters, Dementors, Dark Wizards, Trolls, and Werewolves, and thousands of vampires and Inferi. They arrived where expected, and I activated the wards to prevent disapparition by our enemies. Well, they're here. I'll handle the giants, werewolves, vampires, Inferi and Dementors. I said, getting shocked looks. I can handle it and I have the power and skill to do so. I know that you are preparing to fight. Your efforts are futile. You cannot fight me. I do not want to kill you. I have great respect for the teachers of Hogwarts. I do not want to spill magical blood. Give me the Potters, and they shall not be harmed. Give me the Potters and I shall leave the school untouched. Give me the Potters and you will be rewarded. You have 1 hour. Tom announced to Hogwarts. What an idiot. Was he really so arrogant as to believe that I would allow people of questionable loyalty in here? The little coward was just trying to avoid battle with us. Are you all ready? I asked the assembled force. The Ukrainians, Brazilians, and Argentinians refused to honor their end of our agreement. They seemed to believe that they were safely out of my reach, and I intended to show them just how wrong they were. I was met with looks of conviction and nods of agreement. I forced my will on the weather and darkened the sky, summoning a storm, for the opening of the battle. I quickly called down a lightning storm on giants, instantly killing 20 and critically wounding another 6. I calmly continued their decimation as the Hogwarts force watched in awe and fear. I continued and slaughtered the trolls, swiftly annihilating the Death Eaters' poor attempts at shielding their allies. Within minutes, Tom had suffered over 300 casualties and had quickly lost all of his trolls and giants, and I had barely expended any of my immense power in the attacks. I began walking towards Tom's army, still maintaining my lightning storm that was now destroying vampires, werewolves, Urklings, Inferi, Dementors and Wizards indiscriminately, and the Hogwarts force joined me. The more experienced of our number began barraging Tom's army into oblivion, but the more intelligent of Tom's army separated and began engaging defenders in battle. As I neared Tom's army, I reflected spells back at his army and blasted his snake with holy fire, and when I did, I sensed the destruction of another Horcrux. I quickly expanded the holy fire and attacked any surviving dark creatures, and I quickly destroyed several of them. Let's get Potter. I heard a familiar voice say. I looked toward the source and saw Draco Malfoy, Theodore Nott, Crabbe, and Goyle. I quickly blasted them all with a diffused lightning curse, blowing holes into their chests, and nearly instantly killing them. I continued destroying dark creatures in massive numbers as the Flamels engaged 5 mercenaries each. I noticed my family fighting Tom's minions and easily winning. I willed holy fire into a wide circle around me for defense and turned my attention onto the Dementors, who looked like they were contemplating a retreat. I willed a long rope of holy fire into existence and attacked with the Elder Wand, easily killing 10 before withdrawing my ebony and phoenix tail feather wand, and binding them with ropes of holy fire and then continuing the massacre. All of the Dementors aiding Tom were quickly dealt with and were forever destroyed. I quickly shielded against 20 lethal curses, and countered with a blasting curse that killed 5 people and unleashed a diffused lightning curse on 8 more and destroyed the bodies with 2 more blasting curses. Fall back. Amicus Caro ordered. I deployed containment wards around a group of 50 and conjured fiendfire inside it. Sadly, that only caused more to flee. I had only one option then. I focused on the enemy's life force and magic, and pulled hard. At first there were only screams, but then they ceased moving, and finally they began to look lifeless. Gah! I yelled and pulled harder. Finally, I felt re-energized. The life force and magic of my enemies were flowing into me, the magic I spent in battle was rapidly restored and increased, and I felt like I could fight all month with the life force that was quickly becoming mine. I looked and only saw the vampires left, and they were all looking at me in fear, horror, and resignation. Deo dia hapto. I called out, causing their eyes to widen in fear. Strands of white light erupted from the ground and bound the parasites, causing them to scream in agony. Corpo Santo. I said, unleashing waves of holy fire that erased that filth from this world. I walked over to where I saw James dueling a severely injured Tom Riddle. I was glad that I made sure James had an advantage in raw power, even if I couldn't help him much with the skill disparity. I was just glad that he was a mid-level Grand Sorcerer and that Tom was merely a low-level Grand Sorcerer. James was stronger, faster, more agile, and had a lot of skill, and that was why he was winning and was barely injured. James just struck Tom with a family battle curse to his wand hand and followed up with a blasting curse to Tom's face. Cheers broke out and I moved to congratulate him, along with my family, and his friends. The Battle of Hogwarts had lasted less than 1 hour. Congratulations, James, I said, with a proud smile. Thanks, Harry, and thanks for killing Malfoy and his buddies before they could curse me. James said, to my confusion. No thanks necessary. I thought they were trying to attack me and I dealt with them. I replied. I did shag Malfoy's mom and seize house not as spoils, after all. How many times did you shag her? Sirius asked in interest, causing him to get glares from my family. Over 40 times, and then I got bored of her. I said, causing Mom and my ladies to glare at me. What? I didn't make a commitment to her. We need to begin the clean up from the battle. Amelia said, interrupting. It should only take an hour. We all nodded in agreement. I was pleased to avoid a lengthy argument. I needed my mental faculties for other, more important matters. 2 months later, the time after the Battle of Hogwarts was spent relaxing, studying, and bolstering my power further. I had gotten word that the Megalos clan was on the move and that they had purchased property in Britain. My biggest fear was that I wasn't ready for the battle and that my family might get caught in the crossfire. As such, I had to warn them. That's why I had to call a family meeting. Why are we here, Harry? James asked in confusion. I noticed lipstick residue on him, so I had a good guess about what he was eager to get back to. A family meeting to discuss a new threat, I said, to everyone's concern. In December of 1993, a girl named Alexis Megalos tried enslaving me with potions, to use me as a pet Dark Lord and breeding stud. Due to an advanced warning from our grandparents, it was stopped and she was expelled from Durmstrang. On December the 23rd of the same year, I slew her grandfather in self-defense when he tried abducting me to continue to her family's plans, and when I did, I discovered that he was Gellert Grindelwald in disguise. I said, shocking my parents and James, causing them to look to my grandparents to verify the information. It's true, Doria replied. I acted rashly and sought revenge, so I portkeyed to Greece and then slaughtered the entire Megalos family, or what I then believed to be the entire family. I burned their home to the ground after looting their library and then transferred their Parseltongue ability to myself with a ritual. They, and their immortal ancestor, who I believed dead, are now seeking revenge. Their ancestor is Herpo the Foul, and is likely far more magically powerful than me. What do you need help with? Charles asked. I actually wanted you all to remain in hiding under the Fidelius while I begin my war. I'm going to finish the eradication of the Megalos family, kill Herpo the Foul, and then father a bunch of children with my ladies. I said, the last part getting smirks from my family and blushes from Nysa, Fleur, and Daphne in Astoria. You'll need help wiping out the Megalos clan, the vast majority of them are sorcerers or greater. Charles argued. If I was going to fight fair I would, but I'm gonna trap them and focus on fighting Herpo. I simply can't beat them in a fair fight. Herpo likely has a Horcrux and an advantage in magical power and skill, so that limits me to a very impressive strategy that I devised. What strategy? Doria asked in interest. If it works, wards will be created over all of England that will forever protect it. It's designed in such a way that at least one part of my plan should work, and at least give Wales powerful wards. My strategy involves draining their powers to power a massive system of warding. I said, lying remorselessly. It was possible, but I intended to funnel that power into me and then design the wards and activate them. It would be more controlled and allow a more precise design, so that I could counter my own wards. I wasn't willing to risk being locked out of my own territory. That's incredible, but it would require even more power. A lot more to power it. Doria said. I know. It will be a long-term project, and I'll pour massive amounts of my own power into it, but it will be incredibly beneficial. Will you all agree to stay safe? I finally asked. Yes, can I get back to Cho now? James asked eagerly. Yes, you can get back to snogging Cho. I replied, causing my family to smile. Did you read my mind? James asked angrily. You have lipstick residue on you, idiot. I said, making him blush and others to laugh. I need to go, James said, before disapparating away. My family agreed with my plan, though Mom and Dad did so much less enthusiastically than the others. They were still in denial of my awesomeness and were annoyingly overprotective. August 9, 1998. It was finally the day of the Megalos massacre, which I christened it, and I had already sent Herpo a message to lure him and his descendants here. Soon, I would be immensely more powerful and skilled, and would have some of my most dangerous enemies dealt with. After this, I would only have to deal with the Olympians and any other pantheons of gods. I felt a massive power arrive and saw Herpo the Fowl, who surprisingly looked like he did on his chocolate frog card, arrive. His power level was surprisingly around my own, but much denser and potent. He had obviously undertaken several magic-altering rituals. Well, at least I wouldn't die trying to absorb his power. Hopefully. His minions followed moments later. Herpo the Fowl, I said in awe. I admittedly hadn't suspected that you were still alive, until you were gathering allies for vengeance. If that was your idea of an apology, it needs work. Not that an apology would save you from death, of course. Herpo replied conversationally. Oh, I have no intention of apologizing. Your family brought it onto themselves by trying to Avenue me, twice. I'm not worried about my death and I didn't come here to fight. I said, to Herpo and his family's confusion. I activated my defenses and teleported them away into my prison. Sadly, Herpo fought it and stayed behind. He laughed. How dare he laugh at my brilliant plan? Impressive. You defeated 200 magicals with a single spell. He said, both impressed and amused. We both know you can't defeat me, boy, so why try? To end the threat. And yes, I can defeat you, I said, before blasting him with a torture curse that he shielded against. The shield held and was completely unblemished. I had to dodge his counterattack of fatal curses that would have made me beg for death, at least for the few remaining seconds of my life. I countered with a cutting curse to his arm, before dodging his continued attacks. At least I took off a hand to slow the attack. The poor idiot didn't even realize that I wasn't even trying to fight. Minutes later, I dodged a variation of the blasting curse, and had to disapparate. Honestly, boy, I'm just playing with you. Just hold still and I'll kill you quickly. Herpo said breathlessly. He was getting tired. Good. He stopped aging in his later years, so that should give me an advantage in stamina. Shut up. Herpes. I said, before dodging again. Ah, he got that reference. I was secretly betting that there was a story there. Avada Kedavra, he said in a snarl. I dodged it, and sprung my trap. Magical suppressing restraints appeared on his arms and legs. Sorry, Herpes, but I knew I only had a small chance of defeating you. I said, to his rage. A small chance wasn't good enough. I have a family to care for, and a harem to impregnate. I grabbed us and teleported us to my prison. When I arrived, I quickly placed his restrained form in the ritual circle. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said, with a truly satisfied smile. I felt Herpo's knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released from Herpo. I felt his knowledge enter my mind and become mine. I felt my body absorb copies of his skill and experience, but I passed out as my body adapted to containing twice its normal power. When I awoke, an unknown amount of time later, I felt amazing. I felt invincible. I had so much power inside me that it felt limitless. I was now a lord of magic. My absorption of her pose knowledge, skill, and experience had given me mastery of every field of magic. I could even resurrect the dead now. The best part. My precious ritual to take the powers of others was now closer to becoming obsolete. I was saddened that it was, but I was slowly evolving beyond it, so it was an acceptable loss. I wasn't actually losing anything after all, just replacing. I'd still need it to transfer abilities, and others' skill and experience, but it was now less essential. I began adding the powers of the others. I began ripping the magic and knowledge out of them, one at a time. After each was killed, their souls were trapped, to be used as power sources for my many projects. I finished draining and killing them minutes later. I destroyed the bodies and then teleported back home. When I arrived, I immediately sought out my family. I found them waiting a minute later. Guess who needs to re-upgrade his magical ranking system? I asked, entering the living room. And why is that? Mom asked in slight concern, looking up from her book. I used my trump card, the ability drain magic into myself, on a tier 3 magus. I have now reached the limit of the previous scale, and will have to expand it. I beat Herpo and his minions, by the way, but I've still gotta raid some of their holdings for magical knowledge and resources. I said, to my family's amusement. I'm gonna go do that, all that knowledge sounds incredibly appealing. Be careful, Harry, Mom said in concern. I will, it should all be unguarded. I just need to retrieve all of my magically expanded trunks first. I'll be back in a day or two at most, someone tell my ladies that for me. K. Thanks. Bye. I teleported away, leaving my family gaping and fearful. None of them wanted to do that. Sadly for them, neither did I. I arrived at Black Manor, quickly retrieved a dozen trunks, and then teleported to Greece. I spent hours raiding their holdings. Gold, treasure, books, scrolls, stocks and bonds were all stolen. I must have made over 10 billion pounds, and I loved making quick and easy money. The knowledge itself was priceless. I just had one more location to raid before I went home. I had already stored my previous loot due to a bad feeling. I arrived at the palace, via teleportation, and saw someone waiting on me. I sensed that he was incredibly powerful, easily a tier 1 magus. He was about 6 foot, 5 inches tall, and built like a professional bodybuilder. He had black hair, glowing electric blue eyes and was glaring me. I am Heracles, son of Zeus. My father has sent me to apprehend or kill you. The treasure you seek to steal has already been seized, by Olympus. It was quite a bit of treasure too. He said, smirking after saying that last part. Now, surrender, boy, or all. Yeah, I just blasted him into a wall. I quickly placed him under magical suppression restraints, and then teleported him away to Black Manor. Is that all you Neanderthals have? I asked, looking at Olympus. Now, I will wipe all of you worthless wastes of magic, and your worthless bloodlines from existence. Purely out of spite, I yelled, before sensing a massive source of magic approaching me from the sky, and quickly teleporting away. I arrived, far away from the palace, and watched in horror as it got destroyed by an absolutely massive lightning bolt. I would need to steal Zeus' weapon before waging my war. He couldn't compete with that, not yet, anyway. I needed to chip away at their support base and ranks first. Sadly, I couldn't besiege the Athens school. I wasn't powerful enough yet to do that either. I would likely need to double my current power just for that, and it still wouldn't be enough. I teleported back to Black Manor. When I arrived, I noticed Heracles was still bound, and was now glaring at me. Like them, they suppress all magical ability, including your enhanced strength, speed, durability, and stamina. One of my greater inventions, and believe me, that is saying something. I moved him into the ritual circle and took my place. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said, with a confident smile. I felt his knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released from him. I felt his knowledge enter my mind and become mine. I felt my body absorb copies of his skill and experience, but I passed out while my body adapted to its increased power. I awoke minutes later, destroyed the body of Heracles, and then teleported back home. When I arrived, I sensed my still awake family and went to them. I had to warn them, even though they were still in hiding and wouldn't actually be in danger. I arrived there in barely any time at all. Hello, Harry, Nysa said, glaring at me, and was backed by Fleur, Astoria, Daphne, and Susan. Hey ladies, how were your days? I asked, purposely ignoring her tone and glare. Honestly, I found her glare kinda cute. You left without telling us, or inviting us along. Susan said angrily. It's a good thing I didn't, I almost died. I said, to my family's concern. Apparently, I made enemies of people I thought died thousands of years ago. The Greek gods are alive, well, and very pissed. The good news is that I have killed 2 already, and should have them all dead very soon. I just need a strategy session before I start the party, and design some gear to help me in the war. Another war? James asked in concern, which everyone else mirrored. I can use allies and mercenaries, but I will be participating in taking out the biggest threats. Since I'm the one who pissed those obsolete relics off, it's kind of my responsibility to. I think I can kill them all. They aren't true immortals, just merely ageless and more durable. I know that you've all been in hiding a while, so I'll end it in 2 months. I said, before taking a seat. I really hated that they were in hiding because of me. I wanted to protect them. Instead, I was depriving them of having happy and safe lives. I needed to deal with these threats, as well as any others, as quick as possible. That meant the mass murder of all Olympians and all of their descendants. I left the room to work on updating my robes, ideas already coming to mind. Defenses against light attacks, sound attacks, lightning, melee, archery, or manipulation of anything contained within the robes. I would still need more defenses, but that was a great start. I also needed my gear to withstand my newly enhanced capabilities. Heracles could lift a lot, and now so could I. August 18, 1998. It was finally time for me to start this war in earnest, and I had already been abducting and sacrificing Olympians and their descendants during the build-up, but I still didn't have enough power to defeat them. I sacrificed Phobos and Deimos, the deities. I hadn't resurrected any Megalos. I killed Enyo, Eris, Hebe, Hypnos, and Morpheus, all via sacrifice. Hypnos and Morpheus were caught putting women to sleep, so that they could beat them. I was all too happy to punish them and save some women the shame of bearing their worthless children. Of them all, only Eris had power of note. She was merely a tier 3 magus. I killed hundreds of former Athens Academy students, robbed them too. The sad part was that the school was massive and had thousands of students, so I still had a lot of work to do. Which was the reason I was currently in Greece. Alone. I just bypassed the possibility of being denied by my allies, and didn't even ask them for aid. I assassinated Alexander Van, and then exiled Bidencourt and Abreu from the group, while planning their deaths and the destruction of their legacies. I would be tending to them when I had time, but killing Van was easy to do. He was enjoying his status as a hero and living in luxury in his mansion, and didn't believe that anyone would dare kill him. I dared, and I killed anyone who knew about me and then erased all evidence of my group's existence. I transferred Van's power to James as a small gift, elevating him slightly past mage status and slightly helping him in his mastery studies in Dada and Transfiguration. I hoped to give my excess power to my family, to keep them alive and powerful. I had already augmented my parents' powers to sorcerer level, but I also restored my grandparents' youth, with what I got from Hebe. They were now in their 50s and had their aging halted. I stopped the aging of my parents too. In time, all of my loved ones would become ageless. But that was for another time. I had eyes on my first targets, Dionysus and Ariadne. They apparently thought that visiting a winery was an activity meant to take place during a war. I easily got my restraints on them, before they could fight, and teleported them to Black Manor. I teleported away, after my second targets, while silently thanking romantic couples for being illogical. I was going to inflict major damage to the Olympian ranks because of them. I arrived near a restaurant where Eros and Psyche were dining in a private area. Which was extra stupid, considering the war. I restrained them and teleported them to Black Manor. My next targets were Nike, Tyche, Iris, Nemesis, Demeter, Aphrodite, and Hestia. They were all easily captured and sent to Black Manor. It was highly beneficial for me to target the weak or arrogant ones first. Their numbers were now greatly reduced and they were far more vulnerable to direct attacks, and once I added the powers of my prisoners to my own, I would strongly consider that. I teleported back to Black Manor. When I arrived, I was immediately receiving glares from all of my prisoners. Though, Aphrodite looked incredibly say. Why while glaring, but I think say. Why was her default setting. Now, you're all here to die. It's nothing personal, but, apparently, you all aren't dust in a tomb somewhere. Since things have escalated, I have to wipe out your pantheon and possibly every other pantheon as a precaution. I might keep some of you ladies as pets, but the men will be dying. I placed Eros, the most powerful of the men, in the ritual circle. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said, with a smile. I felt his knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released from him. I felt his knowledge enter my mind and become mine. I felt my body absorb copies of his skill and experience, but I passed out while my body grew accustomed to its new power level. When I awoke, I quickly repeated the process on Dionysus. Well, ladies, I hope you all like your new husband, but if not, you'll just have to deal with it. Naturally, that evoked plenty of anger in most of them. I'll never be yours. Psyche screamed angrily. Nor will I. Ariadne added. Swaz literally a choice between my dick or death. Can I get you both to say the words, give us your dick or give us death? I think that would be funny. That made Aphrodite laugh a little and I had to admit that she had beautiful laugh. Psyche and Ariadne glared murderously at me. If you say it, I'll kill you both quickly. I offered. Otherwise I do need information and I'm not picky about how I get it. Give us your dick or give us death, Ariadne said in defeat, her self-hatred for having said that knowing no bounds. That made Aphrodite laugh again, though much harder, this time. She actually said it. Aphrodite said in awe. I honored the agreement and ripped her life, magic, and knowledge of her, killing her in under 2 seconds. Next, I asked Psyche. I'm not going to play your game. Kill me or let me go, you murderous brat. Hey, name calling hurts my feeling. I said in faux hurt. I ripped her life, magic, and knowledge out of her. Will anyone else be spurning my advances and breaking my heart? I asked, melodramatically. I wondered if anyone had realized that I was merely joking about recruiting them into my harem. I will, said Hestia, Iris, and Nemesis. The others were surprisingly indecisive, which was quite flattering. Hestia will be remaining alive, as a prisoner. Everyone likes her so much that they wouldn't dare risk endangering her life. I guess since you two are unwilling, then I'll see what I can do with the power of rainbows. I said, completely straight-faced. I placed Iris in the ritual circle. Why was I still using the ritual? Light manipulation, photokinesis could be dangerous and severely injure me to the point that I couldn't heal. As such, I needed her skills in the art. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said, with a blank look. I felt her knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released from her. I felt her knowledge enter my mind and become mine. I felt my body absorb copies of her skill and experience, but I passed out while my body grew accustomed to its new power level. I repeated this process on Nemesis too, and learned that her abilities were all based on reality manipulation. I quickly deduced that the same was true of Nike and Tyche's abilities, but I suspected that both had seer powers too. I repeated the process on both of them and then confirmed it. Now, why don't you set Demeter and I free, and we'll pleasure our new husband? Aphrodite suggested flirtatiously. Because you'll both escape. I was joking about keeping you all. That's basically beep, as far as I am concerned. I highly doubt that either of you would ever consent to being my toy, and I doubt that my wife and my fiancé would be all that pleased either. So, I placed Demeter in the ritual circle. 30 minutes later, I had finished sacrificing Aphrodite and Demeter. Aphrodite had begged and offered herself to me, but I refused. I already had several amazing women and she hadn't shown a bit of sadness about her own son's death, which I found incredibly unattractive and it actually nullified her appeal. She was so far beyond what the words, attractive, or even divinely beautiful, could ever hope to describe. She was physically perfect, and my refusal of her was incredibly difficult to manage. I wanted to impregnate her. Very, very, very badly. I could go on for hours about all that I wanted to do to her, but had better things to do. I placed Hestia in a special prison and prepared to leave. I teleported to Brazil, the next stop on my brief reign of terror. I arrived near Bidencourt's personal residence, his ancestral castle, and easily hacked his wards and then trapped them all inside. I tore a hole in the wards and entered, sealing the hole, once I was inside, and beginning my walk to the front door. The minor inconvenience. Several hundred Aurors standing in front of it, and then they suddenly began firing spells at me. I flared my aura and deflected all of their spells with it, and then blasted them all with my new photokinetic abilities, instantly obliterating them. I blasted the front door open and calmly entered. I casually deflected a barrage of lethal curses into a priceless and hideous Bidencourt family treasure, and then easily cut down 4 Aurors with a single spell, before launching 2 overpowered blasting curses at the other 11. I continued through his home, mercilessly striking down his supporters and security. The most amusing part was that they were getting dominated with a spell each, sometimes even entire groups. I soporifically blasted open the door to Bidencourt Castle's Great Hall, and sent the shrapnel at all but the strongest magical signatures. I burst through the dust and began my attack. I began launching curses at full speed. Cutting, piercing, blood boiling, fiendfire-infused cutting curses, heart-stopping curses, drowning curses, dehydration, brain fluid boiling curses, organ rupturing, entrail expelling, and even heart exploding curses. Finally, when my knowledge of curses was sufficiently demonstrated, it was just the Bidencourts left. That was fun, I said, as they gaped in horror at the destruction that I caused. Hundreds dead. I was such a cute little overachiever. Now I seem to recall you informing me that you never had any intention to honor your agreements with members of our little group, and that you were merely using us. Oh, and you dared me to seek revenge. I placed his entire family under a torture curse and held them under it for several seconds. In case it wasn't obvious, I accepted your dare. Daring me to cross you was pure stupidity. I can destroy entire nations. Honestly, how stupid are you? Most sent a minimum of a dozen people to my aid and were considered to have honored their agreement, but you outright refused to aid us, and now you will be punished. I generated lightning with the Elder Wand and began torturing his son and heir before his eyes. Please stop. Davi's wife pleaded. And why should I? He left my family to possibly die, and now he's even doing the same to his own son. You did not marry well, milady. I said. Then kill my husband and spare my son. She begged, causing Davi's eyes to widen and him to glare hatefully at her. I stopped the torture. This was interesting. It was my son's idea for me to betray you, kill him. Davi lied. He lied quite well, but I was still offended. Parents trying to sacrifice their children just did that to me. Davi just hates him for being homo se. Dadul. His wife argued. I healed her son. He just wants him gone, so that he can make Belinda his heir and marry her off to Abreu's worthless son. He just wants to unite the 2 allied families into one dynasty that would control the combined holdings of both families and nations. I loved it when people were provoked into rash action or into turning against their family. Well, there won't an Abreu dynasty soon. I ripped the magic, life, and knowledge out of Davi. As easily as I could breathe and continued. I'll be taking Belinda with me, to prevent her from seizing power in the future, and as leverage. You and your son will be swearing oaths that I will dictate. I would also be convincing her daughter to sire rival claimants to their dynasty with me, and they would be raised and trained by me and to be loyal to me. I would love the children, but they would also be an experiment in controlling a foreign throne. I had acquired Davi's daughter and had her safely stored, under house elf guard, in one of my manors. She quickly agreed with my plan, and actually seemed to think that she would have power over the throne and children. I was going to let her keep thinking that. She was the one that suggested that her father use my group to his advantage, and I wanted revenge. I was going to use her until she broke. But that was for later. Right now, there was other fun to be had. I arrived where Abreu's family mansion was. I hacked his wards to trap them all inside, tore a hole in them, and then entered. Now that I was inside, I could better distinguish between the wards and magical signatures. I counted several dozen powerful signatures, and if I had to guess, then Abreu most likely went for quality over quantity. I even counted several sorcerers among his ranks. Those got my attention and a few were heading in my direction. You are under arrest for trespassing. One informed me, actually deigning to speak English for my sake. That was nice. So thoughtful. I instantly ripped his life, magic, and knowledge out of him. I killed him instantly as thanks for his kindness. I repeated the process on the other sorcerers and slew the weaklings. I continued, destroying the bodies as I walked towards the front door. When I neared the door, I blasted it open with my telekinesis, and entered. When I entered, I dodged a killing curse and began using my telekinesis to slowly rip apart the weakling that cast it, while I killed his orb buddies with lethal curses. Killing curses are for pussies, I said with a smirk, as I watched the idiot draw his last breath. He glared, and died while glaring at me. That would cause some confusion when the morticians got a hold of them. I continued onward, towards where everyone had grouped together for protection. When I arrived, I blasted open the doors and entered, deflecting spells as I did. I ripped the magic and knowledge out of the other two sorcerers. I swiftly killed the other Aurors. Now, I seem to recall you refusing to aid me and even threatening me with death if I ever set foot in your empire. I'm here. I'm alive. And you're the one cowering. I said mockingly, angering him. Would it have really been so hard to send a dozen people to my aid? Everyone else did, and if you had emulated them, then you would still have allies and servants. The Bidencourts have been dealt with, some begged for mercy and were given it. I even took in his lovely daughter. We are going to have so much fun together. I said, angering Alejandro, and who I was guessing was his worthless son. She's mine, he snarled, reaching for his wand. I cut off his hands, summoned his wand to me, and then snapped it and banished the pieces into his chest. Not anymore, she isn't, weakling. I restrained him and left him to bleed out, with his parents as witnesses. She happily accepted me instead. She was eager to be rid of you. You're worthless. Everyone knows it and says it behind your back. You are so loathed that I'm here because hundreds refused to serve you and wanted the entire weak dynasty gone. Your weakness sped up its end. I lied. I wanted him to die a broken, humiliated man, and for his father to watch it happen. I got my wish minutes later. Only Abreu and his wife were left. Your wife seems unaware of your intentions and infidelities, I said, making Abreu's eyes widen. If I hadn't just killed her son, I'd offer her a place in my harem and show her what a real man feels like. His wife blushed and suddenly found the floor very interesting. I'd give her as much pleasure as she wanted, and as many children as she wanted, I said, rubbing my cock through my pants, and giving her a good show. No. You killed my son, she replied, weakly. Final answer. Because I can give you a much better one, and orgasms, lots of orgasms. She said no, you swine. Dobby yelled. I wandlessly castrated him, causing him to scream like a girl. He could really hit those high notes. He could do opera. Now, he could possibly do the female parts too. Let her answer, I said, when he was done screaming. No, she said, more surely. I gave her a light orgasm with a wandless spell. Oh God. Do you want more? I asked, with a smirk. Yes, she replied. I killed her. Beep was wrong, and her judgment was impaired when she said, yes. No son and heir, and no faithful wife. I gloated. Abreu gave me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. I ripped his life, magic, and knowledge out of him and watched him die. I smirked at his dead body, and then left to raid his other holdings. His family's library was of special interest to me. Hours later, I had finally returned to Britain to be with my family. The Abreu family library had several forms of magic that I wanted, and I planned to eventually master them all. But, for now, I had excess power to give away. Lately, I had been wanting to empower my family further to fortify our position against future threats and to ensure that I have my family longer. I was just lucky that I had all this excess power to burn off. Nysa, I said, gesturing to the sofa for her to lie down. She quickly did so, and I began the power transfer. I channeled the power of 2 mages into her magical reserves, elevating her to archmage status. I repeated this process on Fleur, doubling her own power as a grand sorceress. I doubled my parents' and grandparents' powers, they were all now nearly as strong as Voldemort. James, at first, refused further power upgrades and believed that he had more than enough, but he quickly changed his mind when both Nysa and I laughed at him. He was now a tier 2 mage. I still had some extra power to give to my allies though. Wolf sent me 50 powerful wizards for the Battle of Hogwarts, so, perhaps, I would just give it to him. I knew that I still needed to acquire him more territory and to perhaps offer him more funding for his war. I certainly didn't want to lose such a reliable ally. I needed to help Pottle and Garcia more too. I had too much work to do and far too many unfinished projects. Fortunately, my growing power would make them all much easier to complete. Expanding and fortifying my allies' domains, fortifying Britain and acquiring greater control over it, and erecting my grand ward plans would all be much easier once the Olympians were dealt with. I still needed to deal with the Muggles too, but that was easy. Once the magic of my wards interfered with their technology, they would all be easy targets for subjugation, especially for those who were unarmed. Having gotten bored, I spied upon the Olympians and their ilk. They had organized a search party to locate the missing. It was composed of Artemis, Apollo, Athena, Hephaestus, and Hermes. Sadly, they were all sticking together, but if I could get trackers on Themi could pick them off one at a time, but placing such spells on people wasn't exactly subtle, because it tended to feed on people to sustain itself and people were more self-aware than they would ever know. Most just needed to learn to identify the signs, like I did when I was tagged by Ares' tracking spell. I remotely conjured an illusion of myself and sent it to harass the Olympians. If I was lucky, then I could trap them. I knew Athena needed to be eliminated quickly. I could tell that she was angry about being there and had likely advised against the risky action and was merely dismissed by Zeus. I watched as my illusion arrived, before suddenly feigning panic and fleeing. They all followed, not even contemplating the possibility of a mighty Olympian being tricked. My illusion divided into two, while maintaining its integrity and still deceiving them. They, for some stupid reason, separated, and went after them. I teleported away. I arrived near where illusion was and quickly captured Hephaestus, the slowest of the two, and attacked Hermes. I blasted Hermes back, right into the path of my freshly summoned lightning bolt, and slipped the magical restraints on him while he was stunned. I teleported them both away, to Black Manor. I went after Apollo, Artemis, and Athena next. When I arrived near them, I quickly cheap-shotted Athena from behind, restrained her, and teleported her away. She was the biggest and most long-term threat. Her specialities made her one. I barely dodged the counter-attacks of Artemis and Apollo, and had to continue evading while being unable to counterattack. Minutes later, an Artemis finally hit me in the abdomen with an arrow, but I managed to blast Apollo with a whopping 5% of my power, before having to dodge Artemis' attack. I had my enchanted restraints seize Apollo and teleport him away. I deflected the now lessened barrage of arrows, and began slowly turning the battle in my favor. I calmly continued deflecting and redirecting her arrows, which seemed to be in infinite supply. I really hoped that they weren't. Eventually, I grew tired of the tedium and launched the spent and broken arrows at her arms and legs, and caused her to scream in agony, while her magic swirled uncontrollably around her. She glared hatefully at me, launched the other arrows at me, and then blasted me into a tree with silver light. I returned the favor before she could escape. When my vision fully recovered, her power having overwhelmed the, admittedly weaker than acceptable, protective enchantments on my robes, I saw that she was also incapacitated. I quickly restrained her and teleported her to Black Manor. I got back on my feet and then did the same. When I arrived, I quickly removed the arrows and fragments from Artemis and healed her. Well, welcome to my castle, everyone. I apologize for your poor accommodations, but I didn't think you were all stupid enough to leave your mountain. Alas, that's the downside of having Zeus for a king. Though I hear he's whiny, a diva, and likes being taken from behind with a strap on, so perhaps queen is a better term. I said, making Hephaestus, Hermes, and Apollo laugh. Well, I made 3 of you laugh. I think I'll kill you now, so that you can all die happy. I ripped the magic and knowledge out of Apollo, greatly improving my new photokinetic abilities and previously mediocre healing abilities, but his precognitive abilities were truly amazing. I ripped the magic out of Hermes next, and then moved Hephaestus to the ritual circle. I was hoping that I would acquire the means to create my own super weapons with his skills in object creation. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said. I felt his knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released from him. I felt his knowledge enter my mind and become mine. I felt my body absorb copies of his skill and experience, but I passed out while my body grew accustomed to its new power level. When I awoke, I noticed that Artemis looked like she had been crying. I know this is a bad day for you, but try not to ruin my great day with your tears. I said. Both Artemis and Athena gave me a look of disgust. I ripped the magic and knowledge of photokinesis out of Artemis, causing her to grunt in pain. Damn, she had a scary level of pain tolerance. I went ahead and repeated the process on Athena, that glaring was getting on my nerves. I now had enough power to safely confront the remaining Olympians and win, but, first, I would neutralize the Athens school of divine magic as a threat, and finally acquire all of their formidable magic. I teleported home, to spend time with my family. How'd it go? Nysa asked, when I arrived. I'm up to a power equating that of 42 Magus. I'll be attacking the Athens school soon and then moving on Mount Olympus after that, and then we should finally be back to our normal lives. I said, much to Nysa's happiness. Do you really have to do all of this alone? Nysa asked in concern. Honestly, I caused this and I need to clean up my own mess. So far, it hasn't been terribly difficult, and with the level of caution that I'm exercising, this war should end very soon and then we can finally move on with our lives. What about the alliance you formed? Nysa asked. The others are expecting your aid. I can easily honor my commitments without them interfering in our life. At this point I could probably conquer the world unaided, so honoring prior and future agreements won't be an issue for me. Well, please only conquer the world if absolutely necessary. Being an empress sounds boring and time-consuming, and I'd really rather you rule from the shadows and let your inferiors do the paperwork. Nysa advised, though jokingly. I'd probably only take large parts of Europe or all of Great Britain. I would leave the Middle East and Asia to my allies. I know that Advik has dreams of dying ruler of colossal amounts of territory, and I suspect that Aaron has much greater goals than merely restoring Israel to its previous glory. In fact, I suspect that he wants a massive kingdom. I said, actually amusing her more. My husband, the Emperor of Europe. It has a nice ring to it. Nysa admitted, somewhat teasingly. Which I have no plans to achieve. I just want to focus on my family, Nysa. And I want you too. Politics would eventually bore you to death. It had been a productive day for me. I could now create much greater armor and weapons for myself, armor on par with the legendary Aegis itself and weapons on par with Poseidon's trident and Zeus' lightning bolt, spear. It was a good day. August 25, 1998. It was finally time for the assault on Athens school. I had massively upgraded my combat robes to be on par with any piece of Olympian armor and had even begun creating a battle staff to rival Zeus' spear and Poseidon's trident in destructive potential. That weapon would grant me a massive edge. When it was finished, months from now, fortunately, I wouldn't need it for this small task. I was on a cliff overlooking Athens School of Divine Magic and I was quite impressed by its defenses. Its wards had the raw power of over 20 magus and defenses against every viable strategy, except brute force destruction of its wards. It had automatons, statues, stasis chambers with undead, traps, a 200-person security force, and over 500 battle-ready and trained students. This should be quite challenging, because I wanted to end the school here, with no one escaping to continue it. I channeled my power into one massive blast and launched it at the entrance, where the defenses were strongest. I calmly watched as the greatest attack that I had ever launched impacted on the wards and then shattered them, destroying the entrance, 2 stasis chambers, several automatons, statues, and 10 security guards. I teleported inside the school grounds and erected my own wards, which were intended to lock us all inside. I manipulated the residual magical energy and directed it to strengthen my newly placed ward. I shrugged off multiple lightning bolts from 5 descendants of Zeus, mages, and ripped the magic out of them. I blasted 10 new arriving guards into ash and ducked out of the path of a spear of light. I ripped the magic and knowledge out of the spear thrower. I liked that technique and wanted it. I ripped the magic out of several dozen elder students who arrived to attack me, and then I noticed the 30 automatons and statues surrounding me. Fun. Not really. But, I was trying the power of positive thinking. It just wasn't working well for me. I summoned a massive lightning bolt from the sky, forced it to split, causing my nose to bleed a little, and to strike them all. I was quite pleased to see that it destroyed them all. I sensed 2 nearby stasis chambers opening, and launched 2 massive fiendfire basilisks at them from both hands. I looked so cool doing that. I blasted the other arriving automatons into scrap with wandless magic and ripped their human reinforcements magic out of them. Well, enough holding back. I dismissively ripped the magic out of 40 guards who were arriving to attack me, and then telekinetically lifted up dozens of animated statues and easily crushed them. The students watching the massacre were shocked, horrified, and angry. They were going to hate seeing this. The remaining security force arrived and attacked. Aegis. I bellowed, as the spells neared me. I watched in smug satisfaction as the spells rebounded on my attackers, killing most of them, but the survivors had their magic quickly ripped from them by me. The students were outraged that I used the magic of Zeus and they all looked like they wanted to kill me. I blasted the glass in the windows through their bodies in retaliation for their hurtful looks. I used the pieces of the crushed statues and launched the fragments at hundreds of magical signatures and watched without emotion as most of them faded. I began calmly picking off the survivors, mostly draining their magic into myself, but killing only a few. When I was done with that, I went to the school's library and withdrew and unshrunk my magical trunks. I had it emptied in under 5 minutes later, with all of my trunks packed to their limits and quickly sent off to Black Manor. I now had the means to eventually control almost every facet of the world. I was incredibly pleased and eager to gain that power. Sadly, that would have to wait until my schedule cleared up. I continued through the school, taking magic, knowledge, treasure, and artifacts. I even found some knowledge of another surviving colony of giants that the Olympians allowed to exist, for a price. Those giants they intended to kill were handed over to the Olympians instead and had their strength taken away from them and added to that of the lucky Olympians. I could have been adding massive amounts of physical strength to mine by sacrificing all the Olympians, but I still had quite a lot and could easily lift over 5,000 tons. Zeus was still stronger, but I could hopefully surpass him, especially if I added the strength of the surviving giant colony to my own. How did I gain this super secret knowledge? A descendant of Heracles, who was taken prisoner, to be sacrificed along with the other descendants of Heracles. I had killed over 900 people by this time, and the students were beginning to feel safe and coming out of their rooms. Naturally, I continued killing students. The strongest students were archmages and they were especially rare. Mages were slightly less rare, and sorcerers were so weak that they were nearly unheard of. Grand sorcerers were the most common power here. As such, I would have plenty of power to give away. Eventually, I killed everyone here and took almost everything that I wanted from this place. Sadly, my massacre wasn't really a challenge. But, that's not to say that my time here was a waste. I was currently looking at the school's wardstone and had learned that the wards weren't at wartime strength. These idiots were so damn arrogant. If they had them at full strength, I would have had to use half of my immense power. I used the absorbed power of 4 archmages and teleported their wardstone to Black Manor, for study. This, of course, destroyed the wards around the shul, so I teleported to the courtyard and bathed everything in fiendfire, and then teleported to outside the school. When I arrived, I was surrounded by several Olympians. Based on the knowledge I added, they were Hecate, Triton, Pan, Chimapulia, Persephone, Charon, Asclepius, and Thanatos. We should flee, Hecate advised fearfully. He's stronger than all of us put together. I overwhelmed her power and teleported her into my prison. Ignore her, age is getting to her, I said, with a smirk. I quickly overpowered Thanatos and Asclepius and bound them in restraints, before teleporting them to Black Manor. The other 5, they were all beaten far more easily. I can almost read the history books now, from gods to insects, the story of the Olympians. I said, before teleporting to the former Malfoy manor. When I arrived, I immediately went towards my waiting family and my allies, new and old. We recently recruited the current Supreme Mugwump, Babajide Akingbad, and representatives for China, Japan, South Korea, and Mongolia. Welcome to the Order of Power, ladies and gentlemen. I said, to our newest members. Thank you for the invitation, Lord Peverell Gryffindor Slytherin. Babajide said gratefully. The others gave me their thanks too. Your proposal was quite appealing, all 20 pages of it. Unity for Magical Kind and my supporters all agreed with your African Union proposal and we have begun implementation. They all accept that Spain now controls Morocco, Tunisia, Western Sahara, Mauritania, Algeria, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, and all of the smaller nations near them. They aren't happy, but those were all deemed acceptable losses for the dream of true unity. Excellent. Shall we begin with reports? Everyone nodded, though the newer members did so in confusion. I noticed that James still looked surly. He wasn't pleased with my refusal to allow him control of my order. Lately he had been getting arrogant and entitled and had even seemed incredibly jealous of me. He wouldn't even be able to manage it successfully and would just end up getting our entire family killed. I now have control of Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Kuwait now. Wolf began. Once I have control of Turkey, I will begin my conquest of Saudi Arabia and then Yemen, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. That will complete my dream, but I will continue to honor my agreements with this group. I've made my plans to take Germany, with deception rather than outright battle. I'll eventually seize Italy, Denmark, Belgium, Netherlands, Switzerland, Slovenia, Austria, Liechtenstein, and the Czech Republic. After that, I'll maintain my holdings and honor my agreements with the order. Court said, in a somewhat bored tone. I have solidified my control over India and have conquered Pakistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and I'll soon have control over Afghanistan. Once those holdings are secure, I'll take Iran and prepare for Phase 2. Advik informed the others. I will, of course, strive to honor any agreements. Advik was already planning for Phase 2. I wonder whose domain he was merging with via marriage. Whose domain are you merging with? Court asked, in interest. My youngest grandson is marrying Wolf's daughter to solidify an alliance. Neither are heirs and will only inherit if our other heirs die. Advik replied, easing mine and Court's concerns. I was given expectant looks. I have political control of the United Kingdom. Ireland, Norway, and Sweden can all be claimed within a month, once I have dealt with current threats. I said, to their understanding. Status on werewolf preserves are alternatives. My Spanish Empire has opted for eradication. Damian Garcia informed us. They will be purged from my holdings as well. Court said. And mine, Advik added. And mine. They aren't worth the trouble. Wolf said. My alliance has designated Zambia as a preserve and has allotted guards to prevent escape. Babajide said. He wasn't very surprised by their solutions to lycanthropy. The others seemed to have went for extermination too. Excellent. I used the recent war to eradicate massive numbers of them, but I will finish the job soon, and wipe out the Dementors too. I noticed that our new recruits looked confused. Gentlemen, I know you all have ambitions: the defeat of North Korea and reabsorption of it, the expansion of magical China, and the expansion of magical Japan and Mongolia. This group will help with that. A favor for favor situation. For instance, I assisted them in conquests, provided funding for war efforts, and in return, they aided my family against Britain's Dark Lord, Voldemort. They all quickly agreed to join up. They were informed that Russian territory was mostly fair game, but that senior members like Kazakhstan and Mongolia wanted to double their territory and Japan had requested a small slice of island near Russia. That still left China massive amounts of potential territory to be gained. Altogether, Russia would be shrinking soon. Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Japan, China, Belarus, Finland, Latvia, Estonia, Azerbaijan, and even Georgia were all targeting them now. Once the planning was done, it was time for me to bestow my excess power on my allies. I doubled all of their magical power. Advik finally became a magus. Nysa became a Tier 2 Archmage. Nicholas and Perenelle both became archmages, and so did James and China's representative. The sorcerers, Aaron Wolf, Augusta Longbottom, Alexander Greengrass, Babajide Akingbad, and South Korea's representative all became Grand Sorcerers. I would have to meet with my closest allies some more to enhance their powers further, and I still had some Olympians to deal with. I would ensure that my family had enough power to overwhelm my allies, and Nysa and I would have the lion's share of that power. I was paranoid and wanted to ensure that my lady and I could face all potential threats to us. I retrieved Hecate from the prison, restrained her, and teleported us to Black Manor. Well, I'm not in the mood for small talk, so I'll get right to business. I ripped the magic out of Thanatos, Charon, Pan, and Persephone. I placed a struggling Hecate in the ritual circle. She knew what was about to happen to her, and looked horrified. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said. I could feel her struggle against the ritual's effects, but she was quickly overpowered. I felt her knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released from her. I felt her knowledge enter my mind and become mine. I felt my body absorb copies of her skill and experience, but I passed out while my body grew accustomed to its new power level. When I awoke, I repeated the ritual on Asclepius, Triton, and Chimapolia, and I technically broke my new ranking system. I was getting too close to becoming a being of pure magic. I was on the verge of gaining power rivaling that of Gaia, Nyx, and Oranos. I didn't want that. I enjoyed being a physical being. I would need to eventually weaken myself magically. Until that time, I had to continue. I sacrificed the descendants of Heracles next, greatly increasing my physical strength. I would still be enhancing my family's power every day, until I had burned off a lot more of my excess power. Sadly, one could only double their power once a day, but that was deemed nigh impossible. I would be pouring my power into my family and doing the nigh impossible. October 1st, 1998. It had been an amazing month and my entire family and the Flamels were all Magus now. That helped me a lot. I also elevated my closest allies to Archmage status, except Augusta and Alexander. They passed. I didn't fully trust my allies and I wanted them kept in check, and empowering my family and most trusted to be able to do that was a great way. I had channeled any remaining power from my attack on the Athens school into my ward system. Once activated, it would cover all parts of Britain and Ireland, but it still needed massive work and improvements. I wanted Britain and Ireland to be my own personal fortress islands, with unimaginably powerful wards spanning the entirety of them. The wards weren't ready yet, but, once at full strength, my dominion would be very well protected. I wanted every city more secure than Hogwarts, with every magical location heavily warded and defended. Most of these activities didn't consume my time though. I aided Advik and conquered Afghanistan and large parts of Iran for him. I took Turkey for Aaron and then all of Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. It was very easy, and I wanted to get it done before they improved their defenses. Babajide had continued adding member nations to his African Union. Court managed to seize Germany, citing the resurgence of a pro-Grindelwald party that he was secretly a supporter of. He had himself installed as leader and had his puppets installed into positions of power. I had reinforced my control of Great Britain and had acquired indirect control of Ireland, Norway, and Sweden. It involved a lot of killing, but my supporters were now in control, and would slowly breed and brainwash loyalty to me into their people. Norway would be easy. My actions at Durmstrang and the dueling tournament gave me a low level of fame to exploit and speed up the acquisition. I put off confronting the Olympians, hoping that they would lower their guards and my needing to do more important things. So far, I had only captured Hera and ripped the magic out of her, and slaughtered several minor deities and added their powers to my ward system. The most the wards could do now is prevent enemy warlocks from apparating into my territory, but they weren't nearly powerful enough to stop a sorcerer from doing the same. Not yet, anyway. Once I quadrupled the amount of power in them, they would be. I was already searching for massive wardstones to fortify all the magical settlements in my newly controlled territory against attack. I had even found time to get my Dada and Ancient Studies masteries. Granted, it was merely 2 theory tests and then several demonstrations, but it was still impressive and a testament to my time management. Unfortunately, James was mad that I got my Dada mastery before he did. This had only added to his recently developed flaws, jealousy, and entitlement among them. Did you have to get your Dada mastery before I did? James asked with a whine, amusing our family and show. That was probably the 20th time that he had complained in less than 10 minutes. Welly kinda put it off while I was training you in your 4th year. I originally intended to leave Durmstrang with 10 masteries to my name and have an unparalleled and near impossible achievement that would hopefully stand unconquered for all time. I wasn't trying to upstage you. I just had the time to do it and really wanted all 2 masteries. I said, calming him down some. Besides, I did several things before you. Took my owls and newts before you, lost my purity before you, had my first threesome before you, had my first foursome before you, had my first orgy before you, and constantly had a lead in magical power and acquired the ranks before you. I said, causing James and my mom to glare at me. The others were all very impressed by my previous accomplishments. That's not funny, Harry. James exclaimed angrily, causing some light laughter. Of course not. Orgies can be quite tiring. I said, causing Sirius to laugh. At least until you build up a lot of stamina. I added, causing Sirius to snort in amusement. James was blushing by now. The point is, I'm sorry and I wasn't trying to hurt or upstage you. But you did it accidentally. That's worse. James replied heatedly. Technically, I was trying to upstage Merlin Emrys, Morgana Le Fay, Albus Dumbledore, Gellert Grindelwald, and Tom Riddle. James glared at me. I'm sorry. Nothing. He was still angry. Okay. Fine. Academic overachievement is my thing anyway. And then he just stormed off in a huff. Really, Harry? Cho asked in annoyance. What? He'll get over it. I made an honest mistake and gave a sincere apology, and if he can't accept that, then it's on him. I said, to everyone's agreement. Now, he's probably wondering why you aren't there comforting him. The dismissal was clear in my words, and Cho angrily left the room. Did you have to make little of his hurt feelings? Mom asked somewhat angrily. He was being a brat about it, Mom. I put off me gaining those masteries to train him and ensure that he stayed alive, and I found time to finally gain them and took the opportunity, and now he's complaining because he feels inadequate. The world doesn't revolve around him. I worked hard for my masteries. I've worked hard all my life. I said angrily, just barely containing my anger. You mocked him, Harry. Mom said in exasperation and not a little anger. I was joking and trying to diffuse the tension and trying to show him just how silly he was being. I argued. You still should been a lot kinder about it. It seemed like you were mocking him and bragging about your successes. I'm still not pleased about all the say. You've had, and I honestly regret sending you to Durmstrang sometimes because of that. Mom said. You realize that if I had never went to Durmstrang, then I would been repressed and angry, and would have most likely surpassed Voldemort and then became a Dark Lord, right? I never would have met Nysa. I wouldn't have been exposed to the dark arts in a safe, controlled environment where I could safely study them. Honestly, I could have become worse than Voldemort and just burned Hogwarts to the ground with everyone and myself inside it out of rage. I may have even just walked away from Britain out of pure contempt for its mediocrity. I was tired of talking. I gave her one last look of disgust and left the room, followed by a hurt-looking Nysa and a shocked Fleur. I can't believe she said that. Your actions prevented a lot of deaths and you trained your weak idiot of brother and made him a proper wizard. You're the reason why the war went so well. Nysa exclaimed angrily, with Fleur nodding in agreement. I was busy thinking about moving out of the family home. I was very angry that she said that. Hogwarts wasn't worth anyone's time, well, until I got control of it. It was the worst school in the world. Now, it's the 7th best and quickly improving, and when the new classes were added, it would even jump several ranks ahead. I know. I'm already considering moving out of Potter Manor. I'm getting tired of her judgment. Her support of monogamy and waiting until marriage for say is a holdover from her Muggle religious upbringing and is very annoying. Honestly, it's well overdue anyway. We should have moved into our own home as soon as we got married. I think we should move out. Which homes do you have that are ready to live in? Nysa asked. Black Manor was left, specifically, to me. I've mainly been using it for storage, because it was the most secure option. Slytherin Castle is livable and incredibly nice and very secure. Gryffindor Castle is the same and decorated far better than Gryffindor Tower. We could move into those. I'd prefer Gryffindor Castle, it's a more acceptable loss if attacked, and that is possible given my enemies. That sounds good, but you need to stop using an entire manor for storage. What all do you have stored there, anyway? Nysa asked. Lots of stuff. I replied cryptically. I'll have to sort it all out when my feud with the Olympians is done. I'm not sure what all is in there, so I'll want to do that alone. Just be careful, Harry. I'll go pack, you should both do the same. Nysa said, before walking off. How do you feel about this, Fleur? I asked in concern. I agree. Your mother is a prude, and this way we can have say. Whenever and wherever we want. Fleur replied, having left her accent behind months ago. Fleur went to go pack too, and I opted to do the same. Potter Manor, entrance hall. We had finally finished packing, and were nearing the exit. Harry, where are you going? Dad asked in concern. I'm moving out, it's way past time. With James' recent behavior and Mom's disapproval of my relationships and basically wishing them out of existence, it just needs to be done. I'll still be your heir, of course. With James' recent behavior, him being a lord or even an heir would be a true nightmare. I said, as James came downstairs. I noticed that my father seemed to agree with my assessment. Leaving so soon? James asked smugly. Yeah, I need more places to shag all of my ladies, and I'm tired of your appalling behavior. I said, to his anger. The idiot went for his wand, but I forced his arms behind his back, summoned his wand to me, and then forced him to kneel before me. You know, if I were petty, that would be the attempted assault on a lord of four most ancient and noble houses and heir to two more. Why don't you tell me why you've been acting like this recently? I did all of this good and you're the one benefiting and thriving. You're Lord of House Gryffindor and heir to House Potter. You destroyed the Light faction, and I'm supposed to be the new Light Lord. You left me to be the Lord and leader of nothing. James shouted angrily, drawing Mom, Nysa, Fleur, and Cho to us. I punished the enemies of our family. Smith and Macmillan wanted to basically torture an innocent for life, they both deserved far worse. You can rebuild the Light faction under your leadership and without any of Dumbledore's influence in it. I said, calmly refuting his points. Just because I'm thriving doesn't mean you can try taking what I earned out of jealousy. I don't need my mastery of legilimency to know what you're thinking, little brother. I said, accurately guessing what he was thinking. You want control of my order, the Gryffindor lordship, and to replace me as heir to House Potter. You're even jealous of my skill, which is a byproduct of my own hard work and intellect. I won't throw away my hard work or make myself miserable to inflate your ego and fulfill your feelings of entitlement. Then I'll take what's yours. You're an unrepentant dark wizard anyway. James yelled, to our family's shock. You've killed hundreds and some of them could have been redeemed. I will defeat you and imprison you and your whores. I punched him so hard that his jaw broke. Yea, that would need to be vanished and regrown. My parents moved to intervene, but I flung them away. You would be less than nothing without me. You were and are useless. You think you beat Voldemort because of your own strategizing. You had to be forced to train and better yourself. I got you your most powerful allies. I made sure you had the training and made sure that you were positioned to replace Dumbledore. I even killed Dumbledore and his useless sycophants for you. I even poured power into you to elevate you to higher levels. I had hoped that you would get over this jealousy, but I can see that I was mistaken. I casually stripped him of his magus status and much of his magical power, and left him a mere mage. The sad part was that I had to keep my dysfunctional family together. I stunned my mother, father, James, and Cho. I aimed the Elder Wand at James. Legilimens. I scanned his memories, casually overpowering his mental defenses. I removed his jealousy and arrogance, and made him more slightly humble. I also programmed a great degree of obedience into him. I removed his desire for children, and having discovered that Cho was encouraging him to divide our family, I ensured that he found her less appealing. I removed his memory of his enhanced powers, why his jaw was broken, and for the final act he tied these changes to his magic and life force to prevent them from ever truly being undone. If anyone ever succeeded, he would die. I made the necessary changes to my mother and father, and altered Cho to the point that she found James less appealing, focusing on his intelligence, manners, and say.ul performance, and I learned that James was subpar in the second. For laughs, and to punish him for insulting my ladies, I ensured that she would publicize his lack of say.ul prowess. October 5, 1998. It was finally time for me to begin targeting the Olympians again. My scrying upon them had allowed me to memorize their habits and begin predicting ways to capture or kill them. Sadly, there weren't many options. I had continued picking off minor gods and adding their powers to my ward system, and I was certain that I had dealt with them all. My wards were now strong enough to easily defend against sorcerers, but would still need to be much stronger. I had even been able to steal the Helm of Darkness from Hades. That helmet had enabled me to sneak into Hades' realm, which was really a magically expanded cave. It was massive, but it still wasn't very impressive. I had already freed thousands of souls trapped with black magic from this place, slew some magical creatures like a Cerberus, centaurs, gorgons, harpies, hydras, and a chimera, and I had to walk all the way to Hades' palace. Now that I was near the door, I just blasted it open and entered. I began destroying his servants in massive numbers with holy fire, as I walked towards Hades. Fortunately, they were all very easily dispatched, and it was soon just the two of us. So are you going to put up a fight or just let me kill you? I dodged blades made of shadows. I guess that answered that question. I began counter-attacking with light that easily defeated his shadow attacks and severely burned him, even taking off his arm at the elbow. I restrained him and teleported him to Black Manor. I looted his domain of all treasure and then bathed it in holy fire, before teleporting away. I arrived near Olympus, rendered myself invisible and flew towards the mountain's top. As I flew, I felt the immensely powerful wards briefly push me away, but I went through them. They were incredibly powerful, far more so than those of the Athens school, but they were intentionally focused on protecting the mountain. I estimated that they could possibly protect Thessaly and Macedonia at their limits. I landed on the mountain and entered the magically concealed city of Olympus. After I entered, I ignored the ancient Greek architecture and began walking towards the highest placed and most glamorous looking palace. Zeus was an arrogant bastard and ensured that his superiority was rubbed in everyone's faces. He wanted to have a better everything and wanted everyone to be jealous of it, all to inflate his ego further. I hoped that I could break his pride and show him just how pathetic he truly was. I also hoped that I could defeat him and Poseidon, while still being in good enough shape to take their powers. I arrived near the palace of Zeus, and telekinetically opened the doors. As I entered, Zeus and Poseidon both turned to glare at me. Are you two ready to die? You're the last two left. Well, apart from Hestia, who will die if I do. That last part really made them really pissed off. So be it, Zeus yelled, before barraging me with lightning from his fingertips. I just took the hit and let my robes protect me, and they did so perfectly. I suffered no damage whatsoever and neither did my robes. I blasted him with light that he shielded against, and then avoided a blast of wind from Poseidon and blasted him with a high-powered curse from the Elder Wand that tore through his chest armor. I dodged a lightning bolt from Zeus' spear and hit him with an overpowered concussion curse to the face. I had to dodge a trident throw from Poseidon. I trapped the weapon where Poseidon couldn't control it, and in doing so collected my second trophy. I restrained Poseidon and blasted him into a faraway wall. I turned back to face a now recovered and visibly enraged Zeus. He blasted me with a powerful gust of wind, knocking me back a little, and then followed up with a lightning bolt from his spear, that blasted me through two nearby thrones. I quickly got up, barely dodging a second lightning bolt, and banished the thrown pieces at Zeus, who quickly incinerated them, and then struck me with another lightning bolt, that I shrugged off and then attacked him with more concussion curses in retaliation. Those were really effective. I began raining concussion and other sound and light-based attacks down upon Zeus, swiftly beating him back and completely destroying his ability to see and hear. I had him against the throne room's wall and then disarmed him, trapping his weapon with Poseidon's trident, and then restraining Zeus. I tossed the two of them inside a magical trunk and began the looting of Olympus. I had just returned to Black Manor from where I had looted Olympus. I made billions. So much treasure in one place and so poorly protected. Every object of value was taken from there and added to my own holdings. I honestly didn't see the point in using precious metals in construction, it all seemed very wasteful to me. When I completed the looting of Olympus, I took control of the wards, keyed myself in and excluded everyone else, and then placed it under the Fidelius for the future. It was quite possible that I would control Greece one day, and Olympus could prove quite useful to me for security. Now, it was time for me to destroy the sons of Kronos. I removed Zeus and Poseidon from my magical trunk and placed them near the defeated Hades. Well, the last surviving Olympians are on the floor in front of me. I said smugly. I wish I could say that you were all a challenge, but that would be a lie. Do you have any idea how disappointing you all are as enemies? You're all so damn arrogant that you basically doomed yourselves. Even Olympus was easily conquered. I will be seizing the Italy location soon too. I said, angering them with every word. I might even keep Hestia as a wife. They all began angrily trying to break free from the restraints, eager to harm me for my plan. I had no intention of actually doing that. She has begun to see that you're all evil and seems to think my cause is just. She could be faking, but she seems quite sincere, so pure, too. I said, before placing Hades in the center of the ritual circle. Enough talk for now. I'm getting tired of my own voice and recently I strive to keep gloating to a healthy minimum. Oh, and for what it's worth, your loved ones died quickly and painlessly. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said. I felt his knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released from him. I felt his knowledge enter my mind and become mine. I felt my body absorb copies of his skill and experience, but I passed out while my body grew accustomed to its new power level. I awoke a short time later, quite pleased with my new capabilities. My skill in necromancy was now unrivaled by any other in the world, and I now had the ability to control precious metals and gems. I considered this ritual my most profitable yet. My new abilities should enable me to fund wars or any expensive tastes that I develop. I might have to deal with court eventually, and controlling precious metals would help greatly. I didn't trust him and considered him the most likely to betray the others first. I placed Poseidon in the ritual circle. Potentium, tuum accipio, ut mihi. I said. I felt his knowledge enter my mind, as a wave of energy was released from him. I felt his knowledge enter my mind and become mine. I felt my body absorb copies of his skill and experience, but I passed out while my body grew accustomed to its new power level. When I awoke, minutes later, I was in awe of my new abilities. I had a major strength upgrade, and another major upgrade to my ability to control storms, water, and cause earthquakes. I now had the knowledge, skill, and experience to go with my much superior power level. Do you honestly think you'll rule the world, boy? Zeus asked snidely. We were the only ones keeping the protogenos and other pantheons at bay, and you've now weakened the world's protection. I'll be destroying the other pantheons too, there aren't many left anyway. I have plans in place to permanently deal with the primordials and further my other plans. Your concerns are unnecessary, but noted and dealt with. Now, if you'll be quiet, I have an immortal egomaniac to sacrifice. I said, before dragging him into the ritual circle. You are dooming this world, boy. Zeus warned. Yay for me. Now shut the F.K. up. I said, before placing a silencing charm on him. Zeus glared impotently at me and I hit him in the groin with a punching hex. Annoying prick. I performed the ritual once more, this time on a pained-looking Zeus. June 24, 2018. Zeus. Prediction proved partly true and the protogenos did reveal themselves. I trapped them in the same prison that I kept Hestia in, and promptly drained all of their powers into my ward system and finally made them nigh unbreakable. My holdings became the most secured, and when I eventually took over Court's holdings in our 5-day war, I added his holdings under my massive ward systems. Court decided that he wanted to abduct a pregnant Fleur and proclaim her heir to our combined holdings. Sadly, she went along with it out of familial loyalty. I killed Court, kept Fleur alive, until she gave birth, and then kept her alive as a wet nurse for our child. When she outlived her purpose, I transferred her magical power into our son, turning him into an even more powerful magus, and even granted him her Vila Allure. I successfully purged my new holdings of his loyalists. I expanded those holdings all the way down to Greece and then erected fortifications against invasion from Aaron and my other allies who had surprisingly not betrayed me. It was around this time that Nysa gave birth to our second child, a daughter, and Astoria gave birth to our first child, and heir to House Slytherin and an archmage. Both children quickly proved themselves worthy of their positions with their tutors. They proved themselves intelligent, powerful, and cunning and began plotting to expand their holdings. Susan and Daphne had been provided with their two heirs. I even offered them some spares, but they both declined with a prominent blush and smirk, respectively. It was around this time that my order began our final solution, a massive ritual that destroyed most of Muggle kind, only sparing desirable Muggles for breeding stock, and causing Babajide Akingbad to attempt to expose our existence. We killed Babajide and then all of those Muggles, angered the ICW, and then crushed them when they sought to apprehend us for our crimes. Wolfe and Garcia carved up Africa between them and eradicated any and all opposition to their new rule. Only the Americas opposed us, and even then only verbally. They lacked the nerve or will to wage war with us. I had easily wiped out the other pantheons and used their powers to improve and place wards over my expanded holdings. I had achieved most of my goals, and after this meeting, I will have achieved yet another one. Welcome everyone, I said to the Order of Power and our infiltrator. I'm told we have an aspirant who wishes to join us, sponsored by Damian Garcia, King of Magical Spain. Damian took this opportunity to stand and take the floor. He had been harassing the others into making agreements intended to increase his power and kept asserting himself, and trying to seize more power for himself, even over my order. He had finally provoked us all. Yes, my son-in-law, Cedric Diggory of Great Britain, has proven his worth and wishes to succeed me on this council. I believe his presence here could speed up Phase 2. Damian said. He is an incredibly powerful Grand Sorcerer and has aided me greatly in expanding my territory. Damian lied. Cedric was barely of any use. I scried upon that battle. There is only one problem, Damian, I said, to his confusion. What is that, Emperor Hadrian? Damian asked with a sneer. Your daughter despises the weakling and has sought an alternative agreement with us. I said, as my guards seized Diggory. I casually restrained Garcia with magical suppresence. She betrothed her daughter, whom you discarded for her weak magical power, to my son Fitzgerald Delacour Potter. They've already married and conceived while your daughter was on her vacation. As such, Phase 2 is well in hand, and discussions have been opened to unite those two bloodlines with Wolf's. You can't do this. I'm a king, Garcia yelled. Well, considering that you brought an assassin here to kill me and my family and allies and then usurp my rule, I think I can. I find that very insulting. You brought a mere Grand Sorcerer against me. You thought this weak piece of trash could even kill my family, which are mostly above Archmage level. I'm glad that we all ignored your failing mental state. It was greatly beneficial to us. I said, causing everyone to laugh. You idiots. You thought you were dominating the game. You were never even players. I said, causing more laughter and sneers to be directed upon Diggory and Garcia. We've known about this for years. I couldn't resist mocking them further. He's incredibly powerful and aided me greatly. I said mockingly, causing more laughter. I scried on that battle and he was merely better than you used to be, and that was still of substandard skill and shamefully weak magical power. It's been 20 years and he's only a Grand Sorcerer. I said, causing Diggory to snarl at me. Damn, you're pathetic. And stupid or crazy too. Maybe even both. I was a mage before you had even graduated Hogwarts. Did you think that I wouldn't get stronger? Based on Diggory's expression, he did. I placed Diggory in my restraints and sent him and Garcia to my prison, for sacrifice. July 31, 2200. My long-held dreams had been realized and my and Nysa's descendant had become Emperor of Europe, Asia, Africa, China, the now former Russia, and the Middle East. The Americas fell to our combined mights 50 years ago, and our bloodline now ruled the entire world. Per my original plans, I gave control of them to mine and Belinda's children and descendants. Unfortunately, I had nothing left to do but to spend time with my family, and study. I see you, Like all Harry Potters are plagued by boredom after having achieved your goals. A voice near me said. I quickly turned to face the speaker. It was me. I blasted it with my most powerful combat spell, but it casually batted it aside. You know, attacking a deity is generally considered impolite. He said, in slight annoyance. I'm not here to hurt, kill, or replace you. I'm here to offer you a place on another council of elites. All of the members are alternate versions of us, Harry Potters, from alternate universes. How do I know this isn't a prank? I asked skeptically. He smirked in reply. All right, take your true for. He tackled me through a portal. We arrived at our destination, the living room of a house. In my case, I landed hard on the floor. Welcome, several voices said, some with clear amusement in their tones. Okay, maybe I wasn't being pranked after all. I said, to the council's amusement. What is the purpose of this elite council? To ensure our alternate dimensional brethren rule their respective worlds. Unless they opt out, of course. Several of us merely advise and train other Harrys. We are quite pleased that you eradicated Muggle kind, and in rare circumstances we intervene and cleanse worlds of threats such as them. We have eradicated werewolves, Muggles, vampires, and Dementors on 16 Earths, and we cured the people of those worlds of disease. We want you involved and to help us save other worlds. You have proven that you are willing to destroy threats, instead of coddling them, like certain white-haired idiots do. The one in center said. That last part got some laughs, including from myself. Is there a cost to join? Any rules? What are the standards to be considered for recruitment? More importantly, how do you decide who the best looking is? There isn't a monetary cost, just a moral one that you have already paid. We generally work together to solve problems and ensure that worlds continue with magic, and cooperation is essentially the one rule. We generally recruit conquerors, geniuses, and other distinguished versions of us. We basically want you to keep up the good work, but on other worlds. What is your answer? I noticed that everyone seemed to know that I was going to accept. I accept, I said, while privately annoyed that my humor was being ignored. Welcome to the Interdimensional Council of Harry Potters. The end. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.